Meeting will now come to order. Glad that you're all able to join us today. Welcome to the July 13th, 2020 meeting of the City of Raleigh Board of Adjustment. My name is Rodney Swink and I'm chair of the board. I'm joined today by fellow board members John Kuntz, our vice chairman, our secretary, Kathy Russell, Justin Sutton, Stephen Kinney, Michael Rainey, and Marvin Butler. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are conducting this meeting using a remote electronic platform. I would ask for your patience today as we proceed. There may be slight delays as we transition between speakers, participants, and presentations. The Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial body that is governed by the North Carolina General Statutes and the city's Unified Development Ordinance. We conduct evidentiary hearings on requests for variances, design adjustments, design alternates, and special use permits, among other requests. Before we begin the evidentiary hearings on today's agenda, I would like to provide some important information about the steps taken to ensure that each party's due process rights are protected as we proceed in this remote platform. First, today's meetings will be conducted in accordance with the newly enacted statutes in Session Law 2020-3, which allow for remote meetings and quasi-judicial hearings during declarations of emergency. Second, each applicant on today's agenda was notified before being placed on the agenda that this meeting would be conducted using a remote electronic platform. Every applicant on today's agenda has consented to the board conducting the evidentiary hearing on their request using this remote platform. We'll also confirm today at the start of each evidentiary hearing that the participants in the evidentiary hearing consent to the matter proceeding in this remote platform. If there is any objection to the matter proceeding in this remote platform, the case will be continued. Third, notice of this meeting was provided to the applicants and the public in numerous ways, well beyond the legal requirements for noticing this meeting and the evidentiary hearings. Specifically, notice of today's evidentiary hearings was provided by mail to all property owners within 100 feet of each subject property. The mailed notices were sent in advance of the date set by law to provide such notice, and each notice letter notified the recipient of the remote meeting platform. The letters also stated to contact the city immediately if there were any objections to this evidentiary hearing for which the notice was sent, or to the remote meeting platform. I'd like to emphasize no case is proceeding today in which the city has been contacted by an individual with an objection to the case or to the matter being heard in this remote meeting platform. Notice was also provided by posting notice on the site of each property, publishing notice in the newspaper, and providing notice on the city's website. Each notice method was also done in advance of the legal requirement to provide such notice. The notices for today's meeting contain information about the means by which the public can access the remote meeting as the meeting occurs. Fourth, any individual wishing to participate in today's evidentiary hearings was required to sign up prior to the meeting to participate. Information about this sign-up requirement, along with information about how to sign up to participate, was included in the mailed notice letter sent to each property owner within 100 feet of each subject property. This information was also included on the board's website, and among other information, a link to the board's website was included in all methods of notice. Let me emphasize again, no case is proceeding today in which anyone contacted the city to voice an objection to a request or the remote meeting platform. All individuals participating in today's evidentiary hearings were also required to submit a copy of any presentation, document, exhibit, or other material that they wish to submit at the evidentiary hearing prior to today's meeting. All materials that the city received from the participants in today's cases, as well as a copy of the city's staff's presentations and documents, were posted online in board docs prior to this meeting. All materials that will be discussed today can be viewed at any time during today's meeting by visiting www.raleighNC.gov/board-adjustment and clicking the link to view the agenda. Finally, all individuals who signed up to participate in an evidentiary hearing on today's agenda, as well as all city staff participants, were emailed a witness oath form prior to today's meeting. Any individual planning to testify or submit evidence in an evidentiary hearing was notified that they must sign the oath sign the oath form prior to today's meeting. We will also reaffirm everyone's oath on the record at today's meeting. Before we begin the evidentiary hearings on today's agenda, I'd ask our attorney to briefly explain for the participants how we will be conducting today's evidentiary hearings.
Thank you, Mr. Slink. My name is Catherine Hoffman-Hill, and I'm the attorney for the Raleigh Board of Adjustment. Today's meeting will proceed very similar to a regular meeting with a few minor adjustments. If at any time a participant has issues with technology, please send a message to the moderator. Laz Perez will be moderating this meeting. The chat function has been disabled for all members of the board and for all participants, except for the ability to chat to the moderator if you're having technical difficulties. We will start each evidentiary hearing by reading a list of participants who have signed up to participate in the case. I will then call each participant individually and ask that you state your name and address for the record, and also to confirm that you consent to proceeding in this remote platform. The board will then ask you to reaffirm your oath for the record. Staff will then provide their presentation, and following staff's presentation, the board members will have an opportunity to ask questions. The applicant will then be acknowledged to present their case. The board will acknowledge the attorney or applicant for each case first as the point person for that application. Attorneys and applicants, when you call your witnesses, please introduce them and state their name before they speak. We also ask that you pause after each witness so that the board members may ask any questions for the witness before you proceed with your next witness. Also, applicants and attorneys, you provided your potential documents, presentations, exhibits, and other materials ahead of the meeting. As a reminder, please make sure to omit your evidence into the record when you present your case. At the end of the applicant's presentation, we will ask if city staff would like to add any additional information or ask questions. The board will also hear from any other participants who would like to speak in support or opposition of the request. And again, for these cases today, the city has not been contacted by anybody who would like to appear in opposition. When all testimony is complete, we will close the evidentiary hearing. The board members will then deliberate on the item, and following deliberations, the board chair will ask for a motion. The board will vote using a roll call method, and the assistant city clerk will take the vote. I will now turn it back over to Mr. Slink to conduct the evidentiary hearings on today's agenda.
Thank you, Catherine. I would like to start by swearing in all potential staff witnesses for today's cases. When I say your name, please acknowledge that you are present, and then I will administer your oath. Keegan McDonald, planning staff case presenter.
Here. I do.
Okay, Keegan, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in the evidentiary hearings at today's meeting will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, Eric Hodge, planning staff case presenter.
Present.
Mr. Hodge, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in the evidentiary hearings at today's meeting will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Justin Rometta, zoning administrator.
Present.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in the evidentiary hearings at today's meeting will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Brittany Waddell, assistant planning director.
Present.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in the evidentiary hearings at today's meeting will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Daniel King, transportation plan review.
Present.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in the evidentiary hearings at today's meeting will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Bradley Kimbrell, transportation plan review.
Here.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in the evidentiary hearings at today's meeting will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Mr. Kimbrell?
I said I do. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I did not hear you. Thank you. Okay, well, now I'll call the cases in the order they appear on the agenda. Note that we have one change on the agenda, case BOA 0048-2019, which does appear on the agenda as item 8 under new business, has been withdrawn by the applicant, so that case will not be heard. We'll begin with Evidentiary Hearing 1. This is 3 cases that will be called together for the purpose of the evidentiary hearing, but voted on separately. They're all on 1308 and 1310 South Person Street. Have a variance, BOA 0074-2019, design adjustments, A-3-20, design alternates, A-4-20. Ms. Hill?
Thank you. We have 3 participants signed up for this case: Michael Birch, Corey Mason, and Jason Meadows. When I call your name, please state your name and address for the record, and then please also confirm for the record your consent to proceed in this remote platform. Michael Birch.
Hi there, Michael Birch, Longleaf Law Partners, 4509 Creedmoor Road, Suite 302, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27612, and I consent to participating in this remote platform.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Birch, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay. Corey Mason.
Yes, Corey Mason, Merge Capital, 2321 Blue Ridge Road, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27607. And I consent to this format.
Mr. Mason, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
And Jason Meadows.
Present.
Jason, can you please state your name and address and give your consent to the platform?
Jason Meadows, Wakeland Design, PO Box 418, Clayton, NC 27520, and I do consent to this digital platform.
And Mr. Meadows, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Hunt, I believe you're up first.
So I'd like to begin with BOA 74-2019. This is a request for variances to grant complete relief from the primary street setbacks set forth in section 3.2.5.B.1 of the Unified Development Ordinance, which requires a 3-foot building setback from primary streets in order to permit the existing buildings on site to remain in place, as well as legalize their 0-foot building setbacks from Hoke Street in association with a proposed plan to convert an existing 28,276 square foot warehouse to a shopping center use on a 0.85 acre property zoned industrial mixed use 3, and again located at 1308 and 1310 South Person Street. There are also 2 other requests on this property. But before we move from this, I would just like to note that section 10.3.3.B of the Unified Development Ordinance does allow for any lawfully existing non-conforming structure to continue to occupy the same land area with the existing configuration and size of the structure. Even though it may be non-conforming, it allows it to remain there lawfully. However, the applicants are seeking this request to reduce any other further limitations that may come with associated improvements to the buildings in the future. So staff does not require this variance for this proposal, but we do understand the rationale behind the applicant's request and offer no additional commentary as it relates to the spirit and purpose and intent of the ordinance where this setback variance is requested. We don't have any objections given that allowance from Chapter 10. The other 2 matters, A320 is a request for design adjustment relief from the following streetscape and roadway improvements. Oh, I apologize. I forgot to share PowerPoint here. I don't seem to have the ability. I don't know if Laz is giving us the ability to share. Okay. Okay, I just got the presenter ball. Hold on just a second. Can you see the screen?
Not yet.
Sometimes there's a little bit of a delay. Mm-hmm. Okay, here we go. Is it coming up?
Okay.
All right. So the site is just southeast of downtown, where Hoke, Person, and Blunt Street sort of all come together, just north of 40. Industrial zoning, and here's an aerial of the property. So as you can see, the buildings, existing buildings, are very close to the right-of-way, and that's related to the variance request, VOA 74-2019. These design adjustments and alternates I'm about to go through relate to the existing streetscape and right-of-way cross-sections adjacent to the property. And so the first design adjustment is for relief from streetscape and roadway improvements for South Person Street, which is designated an Avenue 4-lane parallel parking street type with a main street streetscape designation as set forth in UDO sections 8.4.6.A and 8.5.2.A. They're also seeking an 11-foot design adjustment to the required 77-foot right-of-way to permit the existing right-of-way width of 66 feet to remain, a 3-foot design adjustment to the required 45-foot back-to-back curb section to permit the existing width of 42-foot back-to-back curb-to-curb to remain, a 4-foot design adjustment to the required 10-foot width requirement for sidewalks to permit a sidewalk no less than 6 feet in width, a 2-foot design adjustment to the required 6-foot wide planting area in order to maintain a 4-foot wide planting area, and a design adjustment to the required tree grade planting types to allow a tree lawn planting type instead of utilizing tree grades, and relief from the following streetscape and roadway improvements for Hoke Street, an Avenue 2-lane undivided street type with a commercial streetscape designation set forth in UDO sections 8.4.5.A and 8.5.2.C, a 5-foot design adjustment to the required 5-foot utility placement easement area to permit no utility placement easement area at all, and a 3.5 design adjustment, 3.5-foot design adjustment to the required 6-foot wide planting area to permit a 2.5-foot wide planting area, and complete relief from the requirement to plant trees within the right-of-way along Hoke Street, all in order to allow the conversion of an existing 28,276 square foot warehouse to a shopping center on the 0.85 acre property zone industrial mixed use 3. Transportation staff is present on this call if you have any questions about the design adjustment or design alternate requests. But before we go with them, I will read the final case associated with this series of requests, case A420, which is a request for a 150-foot design alternate to UDO section 8.3.5.C and Raleigh Street Design Manual, article 9.5, both of which require a minimum of 200 feet between driveway access points, up to an 80 for a street up to 80 feet in width for the right-of-way, in order to allow the existing driveway on Hoke Street serving the property to be located 50 feet from the existing driveway to the west serving the adjacent property, and a design alternate to the cross-access requirements of UDO Section 8.3.5.d to provide complete relief from the requirement to provide cross-access from the subject property to the following properties: 1321 South Blunt Street, 1304 South Person Street, 254 Branch Street, 201 and 262 Branch Street. And as a condition to the design alternate, the property owner would be providing a 10-foot easement with an 8-foot sidewalk to the development to the north, which is located at 201 and 254 Branch Street, and 1300 and 1304 South Person Street. Again, this request is in association with the proposed plan to convert these buildings to a shopping center from the existing warehouse use on the 0.85 acre parcel or parcels. So that concludes the nature of the requests for this site. As mentioned previously, transportation staff is present on the call if you have any questions regarding the design alternate or design adjustment. And if you have any questions regarding the variance request, I'm also happy to help with those.
Thank you, Mr. Hodge. Board members, do you have any questions for the staff regarding these three items?
Mr. Swink, if I may add, Eric also mentioned that all of these items on your agenda today involve transportation-related requests, and you do have Bradley and Daniel on the line. They're here for questions. They may also wish to speak as well. So I would recommend after each presentation asking if they have anything to add as well to the transportation-related.
Okay, thank you for that. I was going to ask a couple of transportation questions, so I will ask first. Do either of you gentlemen have anything you would wish to say in regards to this case, these three items? Please identify yourself if you do.
This is Daniel. I don't have anything to add to Eric's presentation on this one. I'll defer to see if Bradley does.
This is Bradley. No, I do not have anything to add as well.
Okay. Thank you both. My only question, and maybe you just answered it by your statement or non-statement, I was going to ask if you had any concerns about the future needs in this area that might be impacted by granting of these requests. Either of you?
This is Bradley. No, I don't have it.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any other questions? Okay, let us move along to the applicant, Mr. Birch. I believe it's your opportunity.
Great. Good afternoon, Chairman Swink, members of the board. It's Michael Birch. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. As noted earlier, we have Corey Mason with Merge Capital, as well as Jason Meadows with Wake Land Design on with me today. I will try to get as much in as I can, just myself, but they are certainly there for questions if they come up. Before the end of the presentation, would just ask that the application, our site plan that was provided, as well as our presentation, if those can be introduced and included in the record of today's meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next slide, please. As Eric mentioned, we are dealing with two parcels with existing warehouse buildings that have been most recently used for warehouse industrial uses. Here at the corner of Person and Hoke, and one of the kind of the gateway entry points into the city from the south. The plan is to convert these existing buildings, make significant improvements to these existing buildings into a mix of indoor recreation, retail, restaurant, bar, light industrial uses like brewery and micro production. And to really kind of create a walkable, pedestrian-oriented, neighborhood retail center, a place of gathering for the South Park neighborhood to the east and north. Also, I'll just note that to the north, those properties that are on the south side of Branch Street, those are also owned by the same developer owner and are in for plan review as was the second phase of new buildings in this case, but of a similar kind of warehouse feel, same uses, again, kind of promoting that neighborhood retail gathering space vision there. Just note on the front end, you may recall we were here a number of months ago for a parking variance, which was granted. We noted at that time that kind of the vision and the plan that's being proposed here is consistent with the South Park area plan, which designates this block as a retail focus area. And in our work in this area related to that case and the site plan, there's been an expressed desire for these kind of walkable amenities. As alluded to by Mr. Hodge, pretty much all of these requests, the variances, design alternates, design adjustments are required because the developer is trying to retain these existing buildings. The plan does its best to accommodate the street and streetscape standards within those constraints imposed by the existing buildings. So I'll try and handle things in the same order covered by Mr. Hodge in your agenda. First, on the variance request related to the primary street setbacks. Again, these are existing buildings. I will note that we are actually removing approximately 10 feet of that middle building that kind of appears to jut into the Hoke Street right-of-way. There's a driveway just to the west of there, and to comply with site distance standards, we did agree to remove approximately 10 feet of depth of that warehouse, which is about 50 feet wide. But that still leaves us with those 0-foot setbacks. Mr. Hodge is correct that the code does allow for non-conforming buildings to remain. But one of our big concerns, given these older buildings that are also maybe not as expensively made, is that the code says that when you have a damage or destruction of these buildings greater than 50% of the tax value of the structure, that they've got to then conform with the regulations. And so given the type of construction and its age, we are seeking this variance to kind of legalize those existing structures. With regard to the design adjustments, again, Mr. Hodge walked through those individually, both along Person Street and Hoke Street. I will note that we are trying to provide, again, kind of the elements of the streetscape within that kind of back of curb section, providing a planting area that's wide enough to plant trees, providing a tree lawn, which is consistent with the kind of really everything in that area, providing a sidewalk at least 6 feet wide, which is wider than what is out there today. And then the back-to-back section, again, working with staff, given that this is one of the one-way pairs, and given a lot of the study that's been done out here with the Blunt Person project, there was a level of comfort in allowing that existing back-of-curb to back-of-curb section to remain. You have our responses to the design alternate findings in terms of meeting the intent of the article, not increasing congestion or compromising safety, not in conflict with any roadway construction projects. And again, it's reasonable given the existing physical environment, and compliance is not physically feasible, again, both on Hoke Street and Person Street, given the existing buildings. With regard to Hoke Street, the right-of-way is enough, really oversized for this section. So the section or the street section within that right-of-way is overbuilt. It's really called to be a 2-lane undivided, but you can see kind of on that aerial there that you've really got 4 lanes almost there, at least 3 or 4. So what we are doing there, asking for no utility placement easement, again, largely driven by that existing building. The planting area is not, again, we're kind of adding all of this in, but we are asking to permit a 2.5-foot wide planting area that's not wide enough to plant trees there. So that's why we're asking for no trees. But I will note that we are providing 10 bushes to help with parking lot screening there near that western driveway on both sides of that driveway to provide some landscaping and screening there. If you could go to the next slide, kind of run through some of these pretty quick as we get to the last 2 requests. Next slide, please. And next slide. These are just the existing buildings. Next slide. And next slide. That's our site plan if we need to come back to that. Next slide, please. All right. So the driveway you see in the foreground there, this relates to our design alternate request for driveway spacing. Site plan is planning to retain this driveway. And as shown on the site plan, really the purpose of that driveway, we are providing only 1 handicap space there, as well as an area for accessing and providing service to our solid waste containment area. There's also some short-term biking there, but as a result of the parking variance that was granted earlier, there is no parking on these parcels. You also see that retaining wall, which at its highest point is approximately 5.5 feet tall. And you also note, if you go to the next slide, please. Just kind of to the left of that pole in the foreground there, in the background, you can see on the gas station property, there's also appears to be a kind of a dumpster or grease enclosure structure on the gas station property. In addition to asking for relief from providing cross-access to the gas station, we're also asking for relief from providing any cross-access to essentially that future phase to the north. But as Mr. Hodge mentioned, we have suggested a condition of approval that we provide an 8-foot wide sidewalk within a 10-foot wide easement, essentially connecting these 2 projects. We will not have an access point on Person Street. Of course, we have an existing building there that prohibits cross-access to the west, but we won't have any vehicular access off of Person Street, but we will be providing that pedestrian cross-access there. And again, our application contains responses to the findings for those design alternate requests as well. That is all we have in terms of a presentation. Again, myself, Corey Mason with Merge Capital, and Jason Meadows, the project engineer, are here if there are any questions from the board.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Birch. Board members, do you have any questions for the applicant on any of these 3 items? No one? Okay, staff, Mr. Hodge, do you have any other information for us or any questions for the applicant?
I do not.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to open this up. Is there anyone else here who wishes to speak in support of this request? Anyone else here to speak in opposition of this request? Hearing none, we'll come back. Mr. Birch, anything further you wish to add? Any last thoughts?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hodge, you are no further comments?
I have no further comments. You may want to ask transportation staff if they had any additional.
Thank you for reminding me that. Yes, I will ask our two transportation folks if you have any additional comments you wish to offer at this point. Mr. Kimbrell, no. Mr. King?
I do not either. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you both. So at that point, we will, board members, any further questions on your part or any questions? Okay.
I've got one, Rodney.
Okay, John.
So if they're shaving off a portion of the building on Hoke Street, correct? Is that right, Michael?
I don't know.
Yeah, Mr. Coontz, yes, that's correct.
So, I guess I'm bringing this up for just discussion. So if we're shaving off that, is there a need to still have a complete relief from the primary setbacks on Hoke Street as well?
Yes, because we're taking it to the right-of-way line. So it'll be at the 0 foot line.
Okay, so you're basically shaving it back, but it's still coming.
That's right. Today there is the right-of-way actually jogs around the existing building.
Right.
Because we have that driveway there, staff requested that in order to provide the appropriate sight distance from that driveway, that we needed to remove a portion of the building. So we are removing that portion back to where it needs to be, and then we are dedicating the right-of-way essentially to the front of that building.
Okay. I couldn't understand how that was programmed. Okay, I got it now. Thank you.
That's right.
So good question, good clarification. Anyone else?
Yes, this is Donald. I got two questions.
Good.
Okay, now looking at this, there would not be any on-site parking. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mile. We came before the Board of Adjustment. Oh, mercy. It may have been just under a year ago.
Yeah, I remember these guys come before. That's the reason why I wanted to clarify. And,
Yes.
And also the traffic there. That's going to increase traffic quite a bit there in that area, will it not?
Well, I think the expectation is, given the proposed uses, that there will be quite a bit of pedestrian traffic coming from South Park, which is obviously a very large neighborhood without any substantial walkable services and goods within it. So we expect a good amount of pedestrian traffic. Obviously, this is one of the gateways into town already. Headed north. And we think some of the positives are there's a number of driveways off of Person Street into this property today that are being closed as a result of this. So that will help kind of traffic flow in this area.
Okay. Those are only two questions I had. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Thanks. Any other board members, questions? Okay, then we will close the evidentiary hearing and move to the board for deliberations. We'll be taking each item individually in terms of voting. We'll have general conversation. If anyone has anything to offer, or we'll entertain a motion on the variance first.
I motion to approve the variance. John Coons.
Okay, Mr. Coons, we have a motion to approve the variance. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Mr. Mile. Any further discussion? We'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Clark?
Sir, got it right here. I have to unmute myself. All right. Mr. Coons?
Yeah, approve, sorry.
Mr. Mile?
Approve.
Mr. Swain?
Approve.
Let's see. Mr. Sutton?
Approve.
Liz, where are you? I can't see everybody.
Ms. Rudisill.
Thank you, Ms. Rudisill.
Approve.
Thank you. That's 5. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to the design adjustments, A320. I will move approval on this item, design adjustment. I move approval. Do we have a second?
Second.
Who was our second?
Coons.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? We'll have a roll call.
Thank you. Chairman Swink?
Approve.
Mr. Coons?
Approve.
Mr. Mile?
Approve.
Ms. Rudisill?
Approve.
Mr. Sutton?
Approve.
Thank you. That's 5.
And thank you. And our third item, design alternates, A420.
And now
Ms. Rudisill, do you approve your motion?
I would also, Mr. Swink, remind you guys that there's a condition that the applicant has included with their application. And so if you are approving with that condition, you'll need to make sure to state that, if that's what the motion is.
I apologize. You're correct. There is a condition regarding the sidewalk. Thank you for the reminder.
Is this
Okay,
for
so-
A3 or A4?
A4.
Thank you.
A4.
The condition is in the staff report. I could read it for you if you would like as well.
Yes.
I'll refer to the staff report to get the condition there. Thank you.
I may entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Mr. Coons, thank you. Is there a second?
Is that, Mr. Coons, is that motion to approve with the condition
With
offered?
condition, yeah, sorry.
Great. Thank you very much.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Mile. Any further discussion? We'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Puccini?
Thank you. Mr. Coons?
Approve with condition.
Mr. Mile?
Approve with condition.
Chairman Swink?
Approve with condition.
Thank you, Ms. Rudisill.
Approve with condition.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton.
Approve with condition.
Thank you. That makes 5.
Excellent. Okay. Ms. Hill, thank you for keeping us on point. Lots of moving parts, sometimes easy to overlook these things.
Understand.
Let's go to our second evidentiary hearing. This is 2003 Rock Quarry Road. This also is a variance, BOA-0031-2020.
So this property,
Excuse me, I have to swear in our participants first, Mr. Hodge. Excuse me.
Sorry, I was switching gears here. Okay, so this is Mari Carlton and Carlette Carlton, the property owners. Premier Stores, Inc. is the developer applicant. Variance case BOA 31-2020. We have 4 people signed up to participate. When I call your name, please state your name and address for the record, and please also confirm your consent to the remote meeting, and then Mr. Swink will reaffirm your oath for the record. So Amanda Bambrick.
I'm here.
Amanda, can you please state your name and address for the record and confirm your consent to proceed in the remote format?
Yes, so Amanda Bambrick, Morningstar Law, 421 Fayetteville Street, Suite 530 here in Raleigh, and I consent to the online format.
Ms. Bambrick, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe Faulkner.
Yes, Joe Faulkner, professional landscape architect and principal with the CE Group, 301 Glenwood Avenue, Suite 220, Raleigh, and I affirm to digital meeting format.
Mr. Faulkner, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, Phil Kleinman.
Present. Phil Kleinman, Premier Stores Incorporated, 7609 Business Park Drive, Greensboro, and I do consent to this format.
Mr. Kleinman, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
And Reinald Stevenson.
Okay, Ronald Stevenson with Ramey Kemp and Associates, 5808 Barrington Place in Raleigh. I am a registered professional engineer in the state of North Carolina, and we have been involved in the project to look at the traffic and transportation aspects. I do consent to this format.
Mr. Stevenson, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir, I do.
Thank you. Okay, now, Mr. Hodge, welcome back.
Thank you. So this is a request for a 139-foot variance from sections 8.3.5.c, .3.c of the Unified Development Ordinance, which requires, which requires minimum driveway spacing of 300 feet in order to construct a driveway that is 161 feet from an existing driveway on an adjacent parcel as part of a proposed plan to construct an approximately 5,040 square foot mixed-use commercial building on a 1.55 acre site zoned neighborhood mixed use 3 conditional use and located at 2003 Rock Quarry Road. I would note that there has been no plan formally submitted for this property, so that's why they're seeking a variance. Had a plan been in review, they could have sought a design alternate. That is a prerequisite to getting a design alternate, that you actually have a plan in review by the city, a formal plan submitted with a fully cooked and set of plans. So they have a schematic plan that the applicant will be showing you during their portion of the presentation for the proposed layout. But again, it's not an official submittal. So that being said, I will at some point request that transportation staff offer some comment. They have made comments within the staff report related to the 4 variance considerations, but were it not for the fact that no plan has been submitted, this really would be evaluated using the design criteria for design alternates. So since the request is related to driveway spacing, which is more within the wheelhouse of the folks in our transportation department, I would defer to them to make comments on the 4 variance considerations, and probably most any question that the board would be asking related to safety concerns or spacing concerns would probably be best suited for those staff members as well. But I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any of me at this time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hodge. Mr. King, is there anything you would like to say specific to this case?
I'm going to let Bradley speak to this one. I think he's got some additional information to add.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kimbrell?
Yes, provide staff response to the application. Question regarding cross-access to the property north, as well as concern about potential access point to Rock Quarry, what site distance could be achieved out on Rock Quarry. So the staff response provided to address some of that, but happy to answer any questions at this time or after the applicant's presentation.
Okay, so just to be clear, you're saying there's some concern about site distance based on this?
Correct. So, and because the submittal has not formally been made, my team has not conducted a site investigation. However, in conjunction with NCDOT, it was made known that there is insufficient site distance to the south for northbound traffic on Rock Quarry Road. Therefore, NCDOT had concerns with a left out from a driveway onto Rock Quarry. One would also express concern with the right out, considering the same conflict with the northbound movement as well. So that's why I put that in the staff response related to what appears to be insufficient site distance to the south.
Okay, so Mr. Hodge, given where we are and what we know, do you have any reservations about us moving forward with an approval? Do you think we should wait for further information and they perhaps come back requesting a design alternate?
Can I maybe take that to Eric? Can I ask something to add? The applicant is allowed, legally can ask for a variance. They don't have to. The question is whether they meet the variance standard for the request, or they produce competent material, substantial evidence as to the variance standard, or the same as to the design alternate or design adjustment. It just depends on what they're asking for and what the applicable standard is. So the applicant can ask for this as a variance. The question for the board is whether they have produced material, competent, and substantial evidence to meet the variance standard for approval. And I would also, the applicant, when they have their presentation, you can ask them to address any concerns that has been raised as well.
Okay, thank you. Then I can hold my comments. Are there any other questions for staff while we have them?
It sounds like that due diligence should be performed, I would think, by the staff so that we can make this determination.
Okay. Do you have a question from that?
I guess I would ask the staff, do you think that we need to perform additional due diligence in connection with granting an approval of the request made by the applicant?
So subject to the site plan submittal, they would be required to meet any site distance requirement. So upon submittal, it would be a responsibility of theirs to meet the required site distance. Obviously, if they couldn't, then they would be back in front of you all with a design alternate or revise their submittal. As it is now, any driveway along their frontage would not meet the spacing requirement for the standard. So I think it comes down to whether or not they could even be granted an access point based off of their variance request, at which point any future submittal would also have to comply with all parts of code. So I don't necessarily know if it's applicable today for us to get a specific dimension of site distance. Maybe the applicant's prepared to speak to that.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Let's invite the applicant, Ms. Bambrick, make your presentation to us.
Sure, thank you. And I think over the course of this presentation, it's probably going to be a little longer than the first one that you heard, but there's a lot of background on this project that's been going on for a couple of years at this point. So my goal for this meeting, understanding everything that everyone's saying, is to go through some of the history here because it is robust. And then I'm going to pass it over to Joe and Ryan to talk a little bit about the communications they've had over the past couple of years with NCDOT and with staff here. There are a couple other pieces of information that you just wouldn't have at this point. So I do appreciate the opportunity to just work through the presentation and kind of go through the story and show you what we're seeing. So this is going to take me a little bit to chew through, but I'll go as fast as I can. So our developer operated an existing restaurant in a shopping center. His lease was expiring. He located this site, got it under contract in April of 2018. Same month, we did a rezoning pre-submittal because we knew we would have to rezone it. At that point, we did contact adjacent property owners to see if we could buy additional property because of the frontage issue, but we could not. The owner did not want to sell to us. I came in pretty much in late 2018 here. We got in. This was also interesting because this was the period in time where we weren't quite sure how the comp plan amendment statute was working. So we were working a parallel path of a potential rezoning as well as amending the comp plan, since we weren't sure if it was automatically happening at that time. So we filed for the rezoning, and I promise this will become relevant over the course of the narrative. Back in February of 2019, we went through the CAC procedure. There were concerns there about traffic, but they pertained more to concert events. coming out of Walnut Creek, and then connections to Edwin Drive because of the topographical issues there that I will let Joe and Ryan will speak to as well. So we went through multiple rounds of CAC. We got deferred at Planning Commission, but within the same time period, and again, I'll let Ryan speak more to it, we were communicating directly with DOT because we knew we would need to be answering these sorts of questions, and we wanted to make sure that we were being proactive and trying to get some information. Can you go to the next slide? Sorry, can we get the, okay. So this is the concept that we forwarded to DOT. I'll let Ryan come back and discuss that in a little bit. If you could go to the next slide. Back in May, late May of 2019, we did get some confirmation from DOT that they felt that the driveway configuration was acceptable. You can kind of look through there. We were communicating directly with Sean Brennan at that point. Next slide, please. So again, the topography, we couldn't connect to Edwin. So we kept going through the CAC process, ultimately got a negative vote there, but got a Planning Commission meeting vote in favor of recommending approval. So then it went to prior council in September. And at that point, prior council sent the project into the Transportation Committee. At that point, Ramey Kemp came on board because we were squarely dealing with transportation issues now. We missed September, so we went in October. And at that point, council and the committee suggested at that time that we focus on a single access point. And then we learned at that meeting, we hadn't done the transactional work on this project, so we had no reason to know that several years prior, when the Family Dollar store to the north was approved, they had been required by the city at that time to record a cross-access connection. And so I actually worked with the city attorney's office to locate the access agreement that was required to be provided between Family Dollar and this site. So at that point, we revised, the concepts, and I'll get to the site plan versus sketch plan distinction here in a little bit. But because we were in committee and council was telling us what to do at this point, we revised our site concepts to basically locate one access point, designate the cross access once we knew about it. We, eliminated the drive-through and then added a small amount of additional space at that point. So at that point, we thought we were doing what the city had actually requested. So we spent a couple of weeks working to amend our conditions to only work with the cross access and this one point of access having come out of the Transportation Committee. At that point, we heard from Transportation that one access point was all that we could get anyway, so that it was redundant to actually add that as a condition. So it did not end up making it as a condition. So December 3rd, council, because of all these steps we had taken and limiting to one access point plus cross access, the rezoning was approved. At that point, we went into sketch plan. Next slide, please. And at that point, I'm going to let Joe speak more to this. We learned that there were these site distance requirements from the intersections, and you have to meet a certain number of feet, and that some sort of design alternate would be required at that time. We were still going back and forth with DOT, making sure that they were still on board with what we were thinking. At this point, it became a right in, right out, and a left in only with no left out, because of the site distance issue, but that was what DOT was comfortable with at that time. We submitted in March for design alternate. Obviously, then the world melted down like literally 4 days later, and there was a bit of confusion and obviously figuring out what we were going to do with the coronavirus outbreak. We knew that transportation was also discussing things internally, so we lost a couple of months there. In late May, we were confirmed at the June meeting for the design alternate that we couldn't actually go for that, obviously for the same reason with the site plan requirement that came into play, where you had to have a full submission site plan to get a design alternate. Next slide, please. And essentially, everything that had transpired at that point, it was a bit of a chicken and egg discussion for the developer, and that, this had been, he'd been dealing with his underlying sellers, the contract issues. This has been going on for quite some time. And then the requirement that a full site plan round, which can be relatively expensive and can take a lot of time, it didn't seem to make sense to go that route when the really kind of baseline question if this project can be viable really stemmed from, can we get a driveway point? It wasn't sort of a more nuanced, how are we going to adjust these buffers and make this work? It was very basic. We're not going to be able to move forward without the basic sort of like, is there a driveway here? And again, we're not opposed at all to the cross access, but we're going to show you kind of what that looks like. And we think that having to shoot our traffic through another retail use for a sole point of access through another piece of property just doesn't work and is not safe for a variety of reasons. Next slide, please. So at that time, because of sort of this chicken egg issue and this being a real sort of deal driving issue to driveway or not to driveway, it wasn't a very nuanced issue. We made the choice at that point to convert it into a variance because we do have hardships. There are topographical issues here. There are definitely issues with, what the city wants to see here, and we're going to show you that. We've been talking, and we're still talking with staff. We're trying to work with everybody in good faith here to get a project that can work. But at the end of the day, we feel like an access point off of Rock Quarry is appropriate here. So next slide, and I think it might be time to kick it over to Joe.
Excellent. Thank you, Amanda.
Okay. Just a second, please, Joe, before we go forward. Ms. Hill, in our procedure, we normally have the opportunity for the board to ask questions before the next witness. Do you want to do that or let them complete their applicant presentation?
I would defer to you on that as long as you make sure you have all board members have the opportunity to ask participants question either immediately following or at the end of the presentation, whatever you like to do.
Thank you very much. Well, in that case, yes, Mr. Faulkner, please go ahead. Sorry for my interruption.
No problem. Thank you very much. As Amanda has laid out, our process has been a rather long and winding road, and really the amount of money that has been spent by our client, he just didn't really want to go to that next step of going through site plan approval to be told that he couldn't have the driveway, as Amanda had said. So that's why we went ahead and went on with the variance versus the design alternate. I've been involved with the project from the beginning. We originally did the original layout that Amanda had shown you, which was 2 site access points. We heard a lot of feedback back from the CAC meetings about concerns with traffic. So at that point we said, well, one, let's just make sure that, DOT is not going to have any issues. What we're proposing, that they feel that access here for this use would be safe. So we sent it to DOT. As you saw in the previous slides, they responded back. They were okay with it. Then as we went through the process with the city, as far as with the town council, the transportation committee, wanting to limit to a single access, that access pushed to the furthest point away from the other one, which made sense. So we made those modifications, and having gone through that process, we felt that we need to follow back up with DOT again to make sure they were still on board with that. I sent that email to Sean Brennan, DOT, looking just for a preliminary approval on the site layout. He came back, and at that point, they now had issues with it. Rhino with Ramey Kemp was involved. He can express also what his thoughts are relative to some of that back and forth, or express what the back and forth with DOT was. DOT did end up going out there and looking at it in more detail, as we were a little concerned that they had, told us access was allowable at first, and then they were concerned about the left out. And so they did come back with the email Amanda had shown after further review in the field, and decided that a right in, right out, and left in only, not allowing any type of left out. So we redid our layout based upon that to be able to send to transportation staff also to get their feedback. Some of their concern was, next slide, please. as you can see with the site plan, so in order to achieve the left in only and not allowing the left out, the solid red hatching you see there represents sort of like a concrete median that we are proposing. It will still allow a left turn into the church across the street. And you can also tell by the existing striping there, we're a 5-lane undivided, that's starting to taper back into a 4-lane highway. So, and the existing left turn ends right at the end of our site. One thing, the owner did try to obtain additional land from the property owner to the south to straighten out and provide more frontage for the proposed site, but was not able to obtain that. So we came up with this and sent back to DOT, which in concept they are in agreement with. Of course, there's still a lot of other details that have to be worked out as we move forward through any actual permitting of the drive, which we understand and are fine with doing so. This left in would be similar, right in, right out, would be similar to what you see on Peace Street near Capitol Boulevard. There at the Jersey Mike's, the entrance there, I believe they have a leftover into there, but you can't take a left back onto Peace Street out of that. So this is similar to what that layout would look. So next slide, please. So we started looking at the cross-access agreement and easement that the staff had provided as well. We had the map, we just didn't have the agreement itself. After looking at the map and into the agreement, the cross-access itself is really only a very short stub. It's like a 10-foot stub into the property. And so it doesn't even connect all the way back over to Rock Quarry. The recorded agreement also requires each individual owner to maintain their driveways and parking aisles. So we were having concern relative to future maintenance because of that. If all of our traffic is going through there, and that even though that agreement still states that Family Dollar is responsible for that, we still feel that there's some potential issues potentially in the future there as it relates back to maintenance. Next slide, please. So here's where I've sort of zoomed in there where you can sort of see exactly how that entrance. It just so happened in this particular area on the GIS that you happen to have a truck that is currently offloading for the Family Dollar. And, this will be, as we go through and you see sort of some of our turning movements and so forth of how we would have to get in and out if this was our sole access, how that would be potentially a conflict. But so again, it didn't appear to us that this cross access was designed to be primary access for the site. You've got very small turning radius. You've got a light pole there at the corner. We would be responsible for having to work with Family Dollar to remove the paint striping there. Next slide, please. Again, this is just another picture. So you can see, there's curb stops there that have to be removed. You can see how tight the radius, it's like a 5-foot radius turnout there with the light pole on the corner. And again, this really becomes more relevant as you see some of the turning movements that we provided to Remy Kemp, showing how truck access would need to be provided in this area. Next slide, please. So, there were several issues of why we felt cross-access only is not adequate. We have run truck turning templates, which I'll let Ryan review with you in the following slides. Potential future maintenance issues because of how all that truck traffic would be turning at the Family Dollar entrance and making a lot of turning movements, which has a tendency to tear asphalt up. It places all the traffic from both uses close to Lyndhurst Drive. As you saw, but with the Family Dollar truck loading where they're already at. You'll see in our later slides of how this would be potentially conflicting with our site. And then there's no autonomy entrance for new users, as far as if you're going to the site, you see the Family Dollar entrance, but you don't really, you wouldn't see the entrance for the second use, and you may have a tendency to pass that. But that's just a few of the items. I'll turn it over now to Reinald Stevenson, to Ramey Kemp, to let him sort of walk through the turning movements themselves.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks everybody on the board for hearing us today. Next slide. Okay, as Joe was talking about, we were looking at how trucks would have to access the property if we only had to use the cross access that is there at Family Dollar. So with I-40 being to the north, we think most of our traffic is coming to and from the north. So a truck who would be delivering to this site would have to turn, as you can see there in red, through the Family Dollar and then make that immediate kind of sharp turn to the right to get into this site. And you can see what happens there. They're running over the curbing. And Joe mentioned that very tight radius where the light pole is. You can see that they're running all over that, trying to get into this cross-access driveway. So that's just a very limiting factor to be able to do that. And you can see the truck that we used on this picture relative to the truck that's parked at Family Dollar. So it's a similar type of truck as that truck. And we'll, next slide. This one is showing a truck having to exit, if they could get in that way, they would pull in like the previous slide had, pull in, then they would have to back, kind of straight back through the cross access, straight up to kind of where that white truck is parked, and then swing out to the driveway to make that turn out, which they could make that turn out as the white truck in the picture, clearly does and is able to do. But the problem is with this is that they're having to back through the cross access across both drive aisles of the Family Dollar, which creates some, in our minds, some pretty serious concerns with pedestrian and vehicular kind of conflicts with these trucks. So that's a big concern with how these trucks would have to exit the site. Next slide. And in this slide, we're looking at what if a truck is coming in from the south on Rock Quarry Road, just to show what that would look like. And again, you can see that they can't make that turn, that really tight turn where the cross access is. You can see that in the picture. They're outside of the cross access and where that driveway would be. So that's gonna be very difficult. May involve some backing and multiple kind of backs and back and forth to get truck position to go in there. Next slide. We talked about the trucks being able to get in, and Joe mentioned this earlier. This Lyndhurst Drive is about 130 feet from the Family Dollar driveway, and just want to point that out for a couple of reasons here. Let's just go to the next slide, and we'll see those. So what our point here is that if we only use the cross access, then we're essentially approving a driveway access for this property at the Family Dollar driveway, which is 130 feet from Lyndhurst Drive. And if we do that, there's a couple of real concerns that I have with it, and it's hard to. I'm going to try to describe this. It's hard without a cursor or pointer or anything, but one of the big issues here from a safety standpoint is the way these intersections are offset. So you can see in the picture the Family Dollar driveway and then Lyndhurst Drive to the north. Well, you can imagine that the center left turn lane, it can be used by either of those driveways. And so one of the main concerns with something like this is that if somebody's coming south to turn left into the Family Dollar driveway, and somebody is traveling north to turn in onto Lyndhurst Drive, then they're competing for the same space in sort of a head-on type of maneuver. There's an increase in the potential for those head-on left turns to conflict between those two. Now that happens today at Family Dollar, but what we're saying is we are not proposing that our traffic, that's our only means of access into the property, because it just increases that potential for that conflict. So that's a main concern I wanted to point out, and also wanted to point out that just in relative terms there, that's about how far apart our driveway would be from Family Dollar, about that same distance. Not really aware of any issues that are happening out there today from a crash or safety standpoint, but we certainly don't want to increase the risk of it. Next slide. Okay, and here Joe alluded to this earlier too. You can see right sort of in the middle of that picture, there's a sign for Family Dollar. That sign is basically right at that driveway, their driveway that we would be using for sort of access to our site. So if you're a driver coming down from I-40 trying to find this site, that driveway is going to look to you like it's a Family Dollar driveway only site. And you're going to go right past it thinking there's another way to get in to this property, and there's not. So, in that situation, you're basically going down somewhere to do a U-turn or turning around in somebody's driveway, that kind of thing. So it's just not set up to be very intuitive. Another thing you can see in this picture is that the stacking on Rock Quarry kind of goes back to about where this driveway is. And so one good thing about it is our driveway being a little further south would be sort of behind this queuing and allow the cars to be able to turn into our driveway and not have to sit and wait for this queue. So this queue of cars here could block that driveway into Family Dollar. Next slide. This is another view of that entrance. You can see the Family Dollar sign there. It just sort of looks and feels like it's an entrance to Family Dollar. Next slide. Just another view of the same thing. There's the entrance. You can see the fencing there and where the light pole is, kind of in the center of that picture. That would certainly be a conflict for trucks. And next slide. So this is where we were saying the trucks, and we've looked at this to show and look and see how the trucks can come in and out of the property with this new driveway that we're proposing. And this is the concept that NCDOT is okay with here. And also just want to point out that we're not proposing to eliminate the cross access. We're just proposing this driveway in addition to it to make it easier to get folks in and out for circulation. Next slide. The next slide is just a picture kind of zoomed out. So you can see, I did want to point out the curvature of Rock Quarry Road is sort of the reason for some of these questions and concerns about the site distance, and that I think Bradley had mentioned earlier, and team. So NCDOT went out to actually look at this in the field, and they came back and said, you have, I think the email was in one of the previous slides, but they went and looked at it in the field, a couple of them, 2 or 3 people, and came back and said, we're comfortable with the left in, the right out, and the right in, but they were not comfortable with the left out from that driveway. So, but you can see the reason why is that curve. So we have roughly about 450 feet or so, give or take there of sight distance, looking back to around that curve, which would be good for the right turns coming out, but it would not be enough to meet requirements for the left turn coming out. So that's why we have the leftover proposed there. I just want to show you that curve. And I'll kind of summarize this real quickly. Next slide. I've been talking about why the cross access only wouldn't work. And now I just want to just kind of summarize why we think a new driveway will work. But you can see the truck turns would have direct access off of Rock Quarry Road. We would still have a secondary access that could be used not only for our site, but by the Family Dollar traffic. If in an event that there's a crash or something, the Family Dollar driveway, it's important they could come through our site to get out of our driveway in those situations. So I mentioned the further spacing from Lyndhurst Drive, and just above Lyndhurst Drive, there's a signal at the intersection of Crosslink and Rock Quarry. So we're further away from that as well with our driveway, which is typically preferable for roads like this, traffic signals and other major public streets. Our site is going to have really low trip generation. You can see it's relatively small site. The types of uses coming in and out of here are going to be such that there would not be really high trip generation. So, and then as Joe pointed out earlier, there's already a left turn lane there on Rock Quarry Road, right where this driveway will be. Next slide. Now we've talked about this. NCDOT's reviewed it, and they indicated they could support the new driveway. I mentioned it would be a relief for Family Dollar as well, just give them another point of access for safety and circulation. And this is something I looked at going north on Rock Quarry Road. I did not see another property, and there's lots of properties in development on Rock Quarry Road to the north. I did not see another parcel that did not have their own access on the Rock Quarry Road. And I know that's sort of irrelevant for discussion about driveway spacing, but I just wanted to point out, and I think it's more for the driver expectancy and perception and how to get in and out. That's why that's important. And last slide, please. Okay, this is some numbers here. Just wanted to point out that where our site is south of the blue line that has the ADT of 4,000 on it, that's Crosslink Road. That's where the signal is. Yes, sir, right there. And our site is south of that. So we're on the segment of Rock Quarry Road that has the 21,000 ADT. And you can see that the traffic to the north, which is the same cross section of road, Rock Quarry Road's 5 lanes from our site all the way to the north. But north of the Crosslink Road, the daily traffic's 31,000 ADT, and so a lot of folks are coming on and off of I-40 there to visit places and then getting back on the interstate. So so our traffic on our section is about, you can see, is about 30% lower than further up the street, and so and the driveways are actually fewer on our section than there are up at the north near I-40. So, and the other important thing we looked at is we think that the traffic out here on Rock Quarry is not really increasing. The traffic volumes are about the same today as they were, not literally today, but the most recent traffic count, which would have been pre-COVID, the traffic counts were about the same as they were in 2003. So they went down during the recession, they recovered, but they stayed about the same. So, so the traffic out here is not really increasing much. We don't see that's going to be a driving factor to limit access. So that's our discussion and presentation about the request. And Amanda may want to wrap things up, so I'll turn it back over to her.
Yeah, we have literally one more slide. I'm sure there'll be questions. If we could go to that next slide. Obviously, y'all are very familiar with the standards here: unnecessary hardship, conditions peculiar to the property, location, topography, actions that weren't our fault, and that it's consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent. I think we have that here. We have some significant safety concerns, driver perception, orientation within the site, how you would enforce that. Again, the potential for conflict with pedestrians and drivers and trucks at the Family Dollar. And I wanted to emphasize one thing. Again, we did, when we were at the very beginning of this process, just to And like I said, we're not opposed at all to having the cross access as a component of the overall site circulation. But one thing I would mention is when we did go through a full-fledged comp plan amendment, and because those are favored to be larger than one parceled sites, we actually included the Family Dollar parcel in our comp plan amendment request. So we reached out to them on multiple occasions. I believe the city would have noticed them as well. We never heard anything from them. So talking about coordination with a large kind of national retail entity is going to be a challenge. Basically, you know, again, the enforcement, the truck turn movement, I think, is one of the largest concerns that we have. Obviously, we don't want to have any pedestrian conflict there. The topography down to Edwin, as well as some of the concerns that the neighbors didn't make an access point there make any sense. And I would point out too that, you know, we know that, you know, this would give us the opportunity to have a driveway location. We're not necessarily fixing where it is at this point, but this just gives us the ability to have it. We still have to go, you know, to any concerns on the site plan in that process. This process would give us the ability to know that we could have a driveway point, but we are still going to have to go back through the city site plan process, go through all those rounds, work with Bradley, work with DOT to finalize, you know, exactly what that looks like. So we review this as there is hardship here, there are safety concerns, and this would just give us the ability to get in the door to some degree to get into a better site planning process. So on those factors, we feel like it's a reasonable request on the circumstances, and we appreciate your time. I know we've been talking for a long time without stopping.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for that presentation. Board members, do you have any questions for the applicant or her team?
This is Donald. I got a couple questions there. Being familiar with the area, that's a hot spot. Because you got 2 service stations there, you got a church, and you got a shopping center plus apartments. So I'm glad to see that you're trying to add another driveway in there, to be quite honest with you, because I really didn't see how you were going to make that turn in that Family Dollar shopping center. So with that, then the question is, if you're looking at deliveries coming in, do you have a certain time that you may have delivery trucks coming in? Because if you're looking at early in the morning, when people going to work, or late in the afternoon when people getting off, that anyone trying to make that left turn in there is going to be difficult. And if they got a concert going on down there at the creek, it's going to get really crazy. So that's my one concern is traffic, and trying to make sure that we are being safe in that area.
Okay, is there a question as a follow-up to that, or Mr. Mile, any question in there?
No, my question is, you know, the traffic and the safety of people there in that area. Because like I said, that's you got a lot going on right there in that little spot right there. Because there's a intersection about 50 feet up right there going in on that's Crosslink Road. So you got Crosslink Road, and then you got that taking place. So I'm just concerned about the traffic over there.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Mile, I can try to address that. This is Ryan Stevenson. Yeah, we don't, at this point, it's too early to know exact users and exact times of truck deliveries and that kind of thing. But what we're trying to do, obviously, is make it so that those trucks, when they do come in there, they can make those turns in and out, you know, as safely as they can. And that's one of the reasons we didn't want a lot of potential for backing up and, you know, potentially backing into the street or taking a long time to make the turn. We wanted to be able to get them directly in because that could be an issue. But yeah, I think what will happen is a lot of times in projects that we worked on, the truck drivers or the tenants will help to sort of help with that by saying, look, the best time to come in here is going to be whatever, you know, 10 p.m. or 9 p.m. or whatever time it is. And they'll try to work around that. And so I would suspect that these other uses along Rock Quarry Road have figured out how to deal with, like you said, the concert traffic and that kind of thing. So I think that's the main reason. You're right. That's the main reason we've designed that driveway the way we have, is to get those trucks in and out as safely and efficiently as they can.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, I've got one question is, so if you have a southbound delivery coming in, or really anybody, but let's go back to delivery. So if the southbound delivery is coming in your single driveway for this site, and I don't see the drawing, that shows the full, whatever, 54-foot trailer turn or whatever that is the intent for them to come in and circulate and go back to the Family Dollar site, or are they internally going to coordinate backing up and parking and then leave through the single driveway? I mean, what's the intention of delivery there? In other words, are they going to come in the site and then go back north through the Family Dollar site and exit? Is that the intent?
I think, Joe, I don't know if you want to take this. I could try to describe what I think is going to happen, unless you want to jump in.
It'd be similar to how the Family Dollar is current operating. They pull in, back out, and they're doing all of that within their site footprint. So we would be doing the same. It's potentially that either one could potentially be able to leave the other through the other's access.
That's where it's going to get tricky for me, and that's where I'm having a reservation, because I see how they deliver, and that's usually through the path of least resistance. And if I can come in, drop, and pick up and go back to the Family Dollar site, then I'm going to do that. But I'm not a truck driver, but I see it happen pretty regularly, and that's where my concern is, especially after giving your 4 or 5 outstanding points about how tough a ingress and egress is for a delivery driver on the Family Dollar site, and why you want to put it on this site, but at the same time, you want to put it on the site for a few reasons, one of which due to the complications of having it on a Family Dollar site. But in looking at this, I just feel like the path of least resistance is going to go back through the Family Dollar site, which gives me concern, both pedestrian-wise, public safety-wise, and delivery-wise as well. So I'm really trying to not design the site plan for you, but I see complications in that. It's just a complicated site, which is why you're here. I get that.
We could probably use some signage and that kind of thing to sort of direct where the truck drop off is, and to discourage any kind of movement through the Family Dollar site, those truck drop offs. That's a good point, though.
Yeah, I mean, the light fixture's there, and that's going to be, I both know that's going to get demolished if they keep doing that. That just happened just right there on the curb, and that's going to get clipped.
I think we could do some signage. When we get into the site plan, there'll be lots of opportunities to comment and on how we can sign that. But there's a couple things certainly we can do to make that to discourage or even prevent the trucks from being able to exit through there.
And it can't go all the way through the site and exit the rear, can it? And so you come back out there at the bottom of the hill on Rock Quarry. That's not an option due to the stormwater management.
No, that's correct.
That was the adjoining neighbors during the rezoning prevented us from having access.
I thought I heard you say that. Okay.
And there's also the topographic difference would also be restrictive. It's a big drop grade wise from front to back.
So this may be a question for Catherine. Well, what is the remaining entity approval process you have? You have to go back to the city, or is it site plan approval, or what else is left on the bone on this thing? Because I hear NCDOT gave indication they're okay with it, but is that approval, or is that just indication of approval, or where are we here? Because I'm speaking on the presumption of that we'll probably need some conditionality here.
I would actually defer to Bradley Kimbrell to answer that, because he's probably more familiar with the permitting process for DOT driveways. I assume it sounds like DOT has to approve at some point. I don't know what that timing is in relation to the site plan application and approval. So if Bradley could answer that.
Yeah, thank
or
you.
Daniel King, either one.
This is Brad. So one thing DOT requires and the city does as well is coordination, and two agencies overlap, as this would be the case. So the city would have a condition of approval on any dev plan to receive DOT permits before we, the city, issue permits on the site plan. And to my knowledge, DOT has not received a formal submittal. I believe it's just through email.
So basically, the city has to receive NC DOT approval for them to give approval for a dev plan, right?
Correct, but I would also point out that both codes do mention the more restrictive code applies.
Which is?
If the city's requirement, which we require a driveway spacing, whereas DOT does not have a driveway spacing standard. In essence, the city's spacing standard is more restrictive.
So to follow up with Mr. Kuntz's question, so if we approve this variance, the applicant will still have to go through the site process and get sign off from the city for the final design.
That's correct. It really comes down to what relief, or multiple reliefs are granted today, whether that's a spacing and or a site distance, because those are two separate sections in the code.
Well, I would note the application is only with respect to spacing. That's the only relief they're requesting today. And the way it would work is if this is approved or approved with conditions, because it's a variance runs with the land, it would be when they come in for their site plan approval, they would have this variance already granted, with whatever conditions, if you do impose conditions. So that's how staff would then review it when the site plan comes in. And if it's denied, then they would review it using the code provision without relief.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, the staff, anything from the staff, any questions you have for the applicant based on what you've heard?
Planning staff does not.
Transportation?
Thank you. I did want to make a couple comments if I can. There was a question related to the validity of the cross-access. So in the final version of the application, staff response was, it references the offer of cross-access easement agreement. And in it, it does speak to that the access easement for vehicular and pedestrian ingress, egress, and regress over and across driveways and parking aisles situated near or in the future on the Family Dollar property. Essentially, it speaks to, there was a comment of cross-access only goes 10 feet into the property, but the agreement addresses all parking aisles and access. Essentially, staff is confined with the code. The code says the spacing requirement is 300 feet. The code does not offer staff any flexibility to use discretion with a frontage like this that's less than 150 feet of frontage, which doesn't offer staff that ability to grant this. So from an access standpoint on the frontage, staff is limited. Now, I think what's more important to staff is the conflict points. So conflict points coming in out of a new potential driveway would be the left in, a right out. DOT, I believe, in the email represented in the presentation, DOT's email speaks to only 300 feet of site distance to the south. Again, they're afforded the luxury of having a site investigation already completed. Their 300 feet would definitely not meet the standards that DOT has, which is 450. And the city's site distance requirement on this level of roadway is 430 feet. So 300 feet is insufficient from a site distance consideration. So staff would have significant concerns with conflict points resulting with insufficient site distance. So the right out of a driveway would obviously be a concern for staff. That said, staff sees the comments being made about the circulation, the truck circulation. And although this is our first opportunity to look at a site concept, we do see the comment of truck turning in and then circulating out of the family dog access as a reasonable option to address those concerns. So to that point, if there was an access point granted, maybe an ingress only access would be in consideration, and therefore the site distance concerns would be mooted. One other detail I felt hasn't come out yet, but I wanted to bring it to the attention of the board. The channelization proposed into Rock Quarry Road there has an inherent restriction of the existing church access point. So that would be something that, as site plan approval, we would have to look at. Is the church comfortable with their existing driveway being restricted? That would be something that the applicant would have to verify.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think they have another access out onto Lyndhurst. You see it on the picture on the screen.
Could you say, I think that's Ryan, but can you, since we can't see you, state for the record your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's Ronald Stevenson again. Yeah, the church has another access directly onto Lyndhurst. You can see in the picture. So they can, they can come and go there, but I would suspect that they would probably exit there if needed. Looks like they have pretty good circulation in their parking lot. So
I have a couple of questions that are more about planning process. So if they're out of bounds, Ms. Hill, just let me know. But two, one, the cross access is laid out, is identified. Is there the option, it's a planning question, the option of moving that cross access to a different location on the site, or is that because it's already been confirmed by the previous case, it's fixed on the ground?
This is Eric Hodge speaking. I believe that would require a cooperation with that property owner to the north to relocate that access point.
Because I could see from a site circulation, there are ways to get it away from the front of the site, closer to the back traffic aisle, but that's just a speculation on my part. Secondly, if this cross access is in fact implemented and the site to the north loses 2 to 3 parking spaces, I don't know if they only met the minimum parking, would they be required to provide additional parking somewhere on their site, or would that be forgiven because of this circumstance? And again, it's not relevant to this. I'm just curious.
We have not looked at the site plan for that site to the north, or at least planning has not, but I would assume any spaces that exist within a cross-access easement would have just been bonus spaces, and we would have not counted those as required spaces with the assumption that they would be going away when the cross-access was reciprocated from the neighbors.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and this is Daniel, and I can confirm that is the way that the cross accesses are set up. If there are spaces that are allowed to be utilized within those cross access easements, they're always required to be excess spaces so that at the time of the cross access connection, it does not take the site out of compliance. So that's also true in this case.
Cool, thank you. I appreciate knowing that. Okay, other questions for the applicant or at this point?
Point of clarification, please. Forgive me, Mr. Chairman. Keegan, was that you who just responded before Daniel jumped in?
That was Eric Hodge and then Daniel King.
Okay, it sounded a lot like Keegan. Sorry, thank you.
So EDOT has given a right in, right out, and a left in, or they've indicated that's what they would. Has there been any consideration just for right in, right out?
I would recommend directing that question to Amanda Bambrick to kick off,
Right.
whoever she thinks on her team should answer that. I believe that's a question for the applicant.
Yeah, I agree. Rhino, can you and Joe speak to that? I know there have been some conversations. We've had a couple conversations with Bradley's team as well.
It's Ronald Stevenson, Raymond Kemp. I'll say that one of the main reasons for that left end is just to help with the trucks, and the right in, right out really doesn't accomplish that. You're still forcing trucks and either other traffic coming from the coming from I-40 to go through the Family Dollar. And I think DOT recognized that that was, you know, like I said earlier, most of our traffic we think is going to come to and from the north. So a left in and a right out really is the primary movement, and we think that would work to keep traffic off of the Family Dollar driveway. And so the left end is important for that from that standpoint.
I think the left end, that's where my public safety concern comes in, is more on the left end and right in, right out. I think we all can agree is good. I think the left end is what I'm more concerned about than anything. One other question that I'll put in there is, I don't see it on the site plan, but is there a drive-through plan for this location? And if so, I don't see how that works. Is there one for that location? Is it being considered? I think that's something that we probably need to go ahead and get to the bottom of now. If that's something that I would certainly move to make it conditional that there's not a drive-through on the property. Just I don't see how it would work with stacking and all that, anyways.
Yeah, this is Amanda. I think we started 1-on-1, but then we removed it. So no, I believe we would agree to the condition.
Other questions for the applicant? Okay, let's move on to other participants. Anyone here wishing to speak in support of this request that we've not heard from? Anyone else here to speak in opposition to this request? Okay, applicant, anything further from you?
I don't have anything else. How about the rest of my team?
No.
Yeah, the only thing I just want to stress is the importance that left end actually is important, and the sight lines are better for that left end than, you know, the other movements. So I think there's a, that movement doesn't concern me as much as the left out did, but we've eliminated the left out through coordination with staff and NCDOT to address that issue. But I think the way it's set up now is, would be adequate and would be provide for a safe, efficient means of ingress and egress.
And this is John again. And you're Ramey Kemp, is that right? You're not Ramey Kemp. You're with Ramey Kemp, is that right?
Yes, sir. Sorry about that. Ronald Stevenson with Ramey Kemp and Associates. Yes, sir. Sorry.
And your title on this is traffic engineer?
Yes, sir. That's correct. Yes, sir.
So
correct.
from the traffic engineer.
Just a minute. We actually, never mind. Excuse me. Go ahead, John.
From the traffic engineer, the left end does not concern him. Let's let that be of note. And I'm good with that. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other of the staff on the applicant side? Okay, Mr. Hodge, any further comments from you?
I have nothing additional.
Mr. Kimbrell, anything else from you in the transportation side?
I would add, from a DOT review standpoint, they historically would not look at cross-access. And since DOT is not able to deny access, that to me speaks to why they, at least preliminarily, offered support for an access point there. So that speaks to DOT's position on it. Staff would tend to agree the left end is not the biggest movement of concern. The left end, where staff sits on is the insufficient sight distance to the south. I think that's been mentioned multiple times at this point. So that currently being proposed as a right out movement, the right out movement of the site to this access point is the conflict with the sight distance still.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any further questions?
Yeah, just to John's point in his question, the DOT has approved the design of this in the left end, right?
I would have the applicant answer that. I don't know if it's been approved or if it's been preliminary discussion. So Amanda, do you want to have somebody on your team answer that?
Yeah, this is Amanda. It's my understanding Ryan will said what a conditional approval at this point, knowing we'd still have to go through the process, but they are okay with the left in so long as there's no left out.
Yeah, Ronald Stevenson with Ramey Kemp. Yes, the NCDOT has seen this driveway location, sort of this concept. They've gone out in the field to look at it, and that's when they responded with that email that they were okay with a left in, a right in, and a right out. So they have looked at it, and as other folks have mentioned, there's more to do. They have not signed any official permit yet, so they will get a chance to review the site plan and drawings and everything that go with it, and they still have to sign a permit. So if they have any reservations when they review the plans, they will not sign the permit.
This is Eric Hodge from planning. Well, the one thing I'm hearing is apparently the city's transportation staff, correct me, Bradley, if I'm wrong, would support an entrance here, but not an exit, and that the exit be via the shared access using the property to the north. Would you agree, Bradley?
That's correct.
So a truck would be able to come into the site, or a patron via this proposed driveway, but signage and driveway design would be such that a driver would be directed to the north to exit via the shared driveway to eliminate the site distance concerns with cars coming from the south with an exit point in this location.
This is Ronald Stevenson again with Ramey Kemp. One of the challenges that I think Amanda alluded to this earlier is that in that scenario, it would be, I would say, probably very difficult to nearly impossible to prevent people from trying to sneak out that entrance only, just because of the size of the parcel and the depth and the width limitations. You just, when you try to start restricting people too much there, they'll slip out. They could try to slip out the entrance only, which could be a problem, which could be a big problem from the safety standpoint. So I think I would certainly support the right turnout there to prevent that. I just think when you start, trying to force them all a certain way, they could slip out there just given the depth of the site. It's not really going to be a good way to prevent that.
It appears to me, looking at the Family Dollar site, they do allow left turns out of their parking lot. Am I seeing that correctly?
This is Ronald Stevenson. Yes, sir.
So someone who accesses your site who really wants to make that left turn could go up to the Family Dollar site and make that left turn out.
Yes, sir. Ronald Stevenson. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And we think, like I said earlier, again, at Ronald Stevenson, that we think the traffic coming to and from the south is going to be the much lower traffic. So we don't really expect there to be a lot of people who are making that movement. So it sort of eliminates some of those concerns that I think Joe maybe mentioned earlier about sending a lot of our traffic through the Family Dollar and the wear and tear conflicts that creates with their parcel. So yeah, I think that would be an appropriate way for folks to get out, to exit our site and go to the south.
Any other questions from the board? Then let's close the evidentiary hearing and move to board deliberations. Let me just start with a concern. I know this is a difficult case, and that's why as someone pointed out, that's why we're hearing it. I'm wondering about whether this is the right use for this site, which is not our question, but because of the complexion of the traffic and the movement of the traffic, it's creating some challenges. I'm a little concerned about even these approaches that are considered optional and possible if they are really in good interest to the community side. The neighbors pointed out, and again, we were told this, so we heard that the CAC vote was negative and that there was lots of concerns about traffic. I understand that's true in just about every case that ever gets presented to the city, so that's not unusual. But this one I'm concerned about this. I am, on the other side, comforted by DOT's at least preliminary consent. I'm also comforted by the professional engineering team involved. And I'm somewhat comforted by the fact the city still gets another bite of the apple when it gets to site review. So if we approve this, that moves it further along, but it does not guarantee that this is going to happen. But it certainly allows the applicant the opportunity in good faith to continue their effort. So it's kind of mixed feelings on this one for me. So just for what it's worth. Any board comments?
Yeah, this is Don. I'm in agreement with you on that. I'm very concerned there about the safety because even with the traffic coming up from the south, that's right there in a curve. It's a minor curve, but it's still a curve. I wish, and I know that they've indicated that the drop off coming up from the backside of where they're looking at adding this restaurant or pizza place. I wish that the drop off wasn't so bad. That way they would be able to come out through the bottom because there's another street run right in the back half of there, which would kind of resolve some of those issues. So I'm still kind of hung up, but I'm glad to hear what they are trying to do here. So with that, I would be supportive of it, at this time. Of course, everything's still on a review at this point.
Thank you. Any other comments?
No, I agree with what both you have said, that the question before us is, are we going to grant the variance? And when we grant the variance, it's up to the NCDOT and the city to deal with the traffic configurations. So.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Anyone else? We'll have a motion. I welcome a motion.
I vote to approve.
I think we want to talk about conditions. Obviously, I think the conditions are still out there. With
John, just a moment, please. We have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Well, if you would like to talk about conditions and the motion to approve it is not seconded, then it would fail, and then you can make another motion with conditions.
Correct. I was giving someone the chance to see if there would be a second.
I would go ahead and second with whatever condition that may be added. I don't know what they may be at this point.
Well, the motion was to make a motion without conditions. So if you guys would like to just let that sit for a second and discuss conditions and see if somebody would like to offer a motion with conditions, you could do that.
Okay, Mr. Koontz, go ahead.
Well, I think the obvious conditions are already, I think, in process, which are, city and NCDOT, Raleigh Dev and NCDOT. So I don't think we need to list those, but I do think that, let's say that something backs out with the intended use here, we need to, I would think, restrict, and as they've already said, they've agreed to a drive-through component, it should be off the table as it relates to, end use and site plan.
Okay, so you're suggesting a suitable condition would be to eliminate any drive-through.
Yeah, I think we've already got a complicated site. I think it's the prudent thing to do. They're not trying to do one anyways, but I don't think that hurts by any means.
Ms. Rudisil, would you consider adding that as a condition?
I think that's fine, but I guess, would that require approval from the planning department or from us to do it?
So the way conditions work, what state law says is that the board can oppose. You don't have to have the applicant's approval to the condition like you do with a rezoning. It's the board, appropriate conditions may be opposed on any variance, provided the conditions are reasonably related to the variance. So really, you have discretion to impose conditions you think are necessary for the request to meet the variance standard. So if you think that prohibiting drive-throughs to the property, what would happen is that the variance would be approved with that condition. So if they were to have a drive-through at the property, then the variance would not apply. They would not be able to take advantage of the variance approval.
Well, with that being said, then can we just make one of the conditions that approval with approval from the DOT and the City of Raleigh traffic, make that the condition, because that's going to be the driving force here, I would think. Can we just make that the condition for us?
You could, but that's going to be, from what I'm understanding from staff, that's going to be required anyways before they can proceed. If they don't get that DOT approval, then their site plan will not be approved. The one thing I will remind you guys, I think I've already said this earlier, is that if you approve the variance with conditions, then when it comes in for site plan, staff doesn't revisit this particular standard. Again, the spacing requirement, they've already been granted a variance with whatever condition. So they review it with that understanding. So, but they will be required to have DOT approval for site plan final approval.
Okay, that would be my only concern.
Yeah, I think that condition's fine.
That condition being the drive-through prohibition?
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Mile, you had seconded the motion. Are you willing to second it with that condition?
I am, so I will second that.
Any further discussion from the board? Can I have a motion and a second to approve the variance with the condition that there be no drive-through as part of the property? We'll have a roll call vote. Mr. Puccini?
Just want to make sure that is the motion to approve with the condition that drive-throughs will be prohibited.
I believe that is correct.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Ms. Whitesell?
Approved with conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Miles.
Approved with conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Swink.
Approved with condition.
Thank you, Mr. Coons.
Approved condition.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton.
Approved with conditions.
Thank you, that's 5.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Bambrick and her team. I would like to suggest we take a short break, a 5 to 7 minute break before we go on to our next case. We've been at it 2 hours. So everybody take a break. We'll be right back. continue our hearing. We're now to evidentiary hearing item 3. This is a design alternate A-14-20 Freedom Industrial Park LLC.
Okay, thank you, sorry. This is design alternate case A1420. The addresses, I don't know if you read them all. There's quite a few. So 1200 and 1198 Parton Road, 901, 1001, 1005, and 1009 Freedom Drive, and then 4524, 4702, 4704, and 4710 New Bern Avenue. We have 5 people signed up to participate in this case. When I call your name, please state your name and address for the record, and please also confirm your consent to proceed in this remote format. And then Mr. Swink will reaffirm your oath for the record. So Jamie Schwedler.
Good afternoon. This is Jamie Schwedler, 301 Fayetteville Street with Parker Poe on behalf of the applicant.
And can you please confirm your consent to proceed in the remote format?
Confirmed.
Okay, Ms. Schwedler, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Collier Marsh.
Collier Marsh with Parker Poe, Adams, and Bernstein, 301 Fayetteville Street, and I consent to this format.
Okay, Mr. Marsh, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Travis Flewitt. Travis, can you hear us? I'll go on for the next 2 and then we can see. It looks like Travis, Laz, our moderator, it looks like Travis is logged in. Oh, there we go. He just was on mute. Travis, can you hear us? Okay, I'll go on to the next 2 participants and we'll come back to Travis. Corey Howell.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. This is Corey Howell with Kimley Horn, 421 Fayetteville Street, licensed professional civil engineer, and I consent to the remote format.
Mr. Howell, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Justin Parker.
Hey, good afternoon. Justin Parker with Al Nyer, the applicant. Address is 4509 Creedmoor Road, Suite 201, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27612.
And can you please confirm your consent to the remote proceeding?
I consent.
Mr. Parker, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Okay, and let's try Travis Flewitt again.
I know that he can hear you, but I think he's having some challenges with his audio.
Okay. Jamie and Collier, since he signed up to participate, we'll need to have him before the board votes, make sure that we have his confirmation to proceed in this remote format. If you want to try to get him on the phone, you can do that and have him. It's up to you. You can either have us proceed with the next case and come back to you, or you can proceed with your case and get him on the line, get Travis on the line before the board considers the matter and closes the evidentiary hearing.
Thank you, Catherine. This is Jamie Schwedler. I'd prefer for us to go forward with the case. We do have a presentation and I planned on calling him at the end for the convenience of the board in this remote format. So I don't know if you're asking me to try to get him on the line and kind of like hold my phone up, or if the city's able to just have him call in directly in some manner.
I'm not sure, Laz, is there a way to have him call in where the city can call him? And if not, then if you can get him on the phone, Jamie, as long as we can confirm that it's him, then that would work as well.
I'll try to guide him through the chat to get him logged in through the phone.
Okay, and if not, we just have to make sure that he gets on the record and gives his consent to proceed in the remote format. So if you and Collier want to work on trying to get him to call in, you can call him on your phone if we could hear him. I believe somebody has done that in a prior hearing. It's up to you, really.
Okay, he said he just rejoined. If we could try to test the microphone again.
Okay, Travis,
Hello?
can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Great, yes, I can.
Hey, great.
Hey.
Travis Flewitt with Kimley Horn and Associates, 421 Fayetteville Street, Suite 600, Raleigh, and I consent to this format.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Flewitt, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great, thank you. Mr. McDonald, it's your turn now.
All right, thank you very much. One moment, we're sorting out our mics so there's not background noise. So this is a request for a design alternate from the cross-access requirements set forth in section 835D of the Unified Development Ordinance to not provide cross-access to the properties to the west, pin 1734040-246, and to the south, pin 173-413-0987, in order to construct two general buildings totaling 423,326 square feet for warehouse and distribution and light industrial uses on a 27.96 acre property zoned IX3 and IX3 CU, located at 1200 and 1198 Parton Road, 901, 1001, 1005, and 1001 Freedom Drive, and 4524, 4702, 4704, and 4710 New Bern Avenue. So as stated in the request, this is related to cross-access. Some of the board members may remember that this project has been here before, albeit for different relief. But essentially, the applicant is seeking a relief from having to provide cross-access to the properties to the south. So property shown here, and also the property to the west here. So essentially, there is an existing cross-access easement on the property to the south that is known colloquially as Pony Chase Lane, and that's part of the justification for them seeking relief, seeing as property users to the south can utilize Pony Chase Lane now or in the future, if need be, to access Freedom Drive. Also represented in their application is the available access provided on the property to the west to New Hope Road and then up to New Bern Avenue. So in the interest of time, I will note that transportation staff does not have any specific comments related to this design alternate request. I have no further comment, but can answer any questions if there are any from the board. And if not, I know the applicant has a more detailed presentation providing some additional background and information as well.
Great, thank you very much. Board members, any questions for Keegan? Okay, Ms. Schwadler, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Swink. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to the members of the board.
Chairman Swink, I think you may be muted.
Am I?
I could hear you.
Yeah. I don't believe I'm muted.
Can you all hear me? This is Jamie Schwadler.
Yeah, I hear you. So, well,
Mr. Chair, my computer was muted, but.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks for verifying. I always want to double check. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much. Jamie Schwadler on behalf of the applicant. And at this time, we'd like to ask that our application presentation, the case report, and all supporting materials be admitted into the record.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate Keegan mentioning that this case came before the board, but I know that some of our members were not part of the board at that time, so I'll just briefly summarize that this case was before the board in December from relief from block perimeter. It then went through staff review and came to the cross-access issue, and we were able to successfully work with staff and satisfy the code in other respects, but the cross-access easement was the one area that still remained. And so that's why we're back before you today. If I could go to the next slide, please. So as Keegan mentioned, this design alternate request is for relief from the cross-access requirements between the proposed industrial site, which is outlined in the dark blue on your screen, and the parcels to the south and west, which are shown on the screen with red stars. Those are the same parcels that Keegan circled. The parcel to the south, as Keegan noted, has an existing recorded access to Freedom Drive that's shown there in the light blue. And the parcel to the west has direct frontage on New Hope Road. So the lack of additional cross-access through our industrial site will not increase congestion or meaningfully improve connectivity. And instead, requiring these cross-access easements would not be compatible with the adjacent uses. And I'd like to show you just a bit more on those topics. Next slide, please. This slide shows an aerial of the surrounding context with the proposed site plan shown over top, again outlined in blue for our parcel boundaries, and with the parcels to the south and west marked with the red stars. The red arrows show the direct access out to Freedom Drive and to New Hope Road for those parcels to the south and west that we're seeking relief from, as well as connectivity in the surrounding area. And I would like to note that on our site to the very north of the edge of our parcel, but south of the middle school, is the extension of Bullock Farm Road. We are also making that extension in connection with the site plan. So there will be increased connectivity in that aspect as well. Next slide, please. This shows the proposed use, which is an industrial warehouse facility with two large, long buildings oriented north-south and separated by a middle truck delivery court. The green arrows you see on your screen show the points of ingress and egress from the site, and those will not change regardless of the outcome of our request today. Neither will the existing easement at the property line along the southern parcel. Again, this is an existing recorded access. We're not asking for relief here. We are only asking for the north-south cross easement accesses shown in yellow on your screen for relief from these accesses and easements, and they not be required. Next slide, please. This slide shows the existing access to the south in a little bit more detail. So the existing easement, again, is shown in light blue. As referenced on the screen by book and page, it's recorded with the Wake County Registry and provides vehicular cross-access from the southern parcel directly out to Freedom Drive in a location that is that's been used by residents over the years as what has been called Pony Chase Lane, and is in a direct location closer to Freedom Drive than those residents would otherwise experience going north through the proposed cross-access easement. The southern parcel contains a mobile home park, which has a different intensity, use, and traffic pattern from the proposed industrial use. The park will be primarily residential and will continue to use the existing easement as that closest route to Freedom Drive. However, the proposed industrial use will have employees, service, and distribution vehicles that will access the Bullock Farm Road extension to the north that I mentioned. Mixing these two patterns across the industrial site would tend to conflict, and the uses are not compatible. The City Council recognized this compatibility issue when the subject site was rezoned last year, and the case included almost a page of conditions, which appear on page 44 of your packet, separating the existing mobile home park use from the proposed industrial use. These included a fence and plantings between the two properties. The removal of additional cross-access will further honor Council's wishes to separate these two uses that they acknowledged were incompatible, and a lot of work was put in to make sure that those two uses were appropriately separated. As a result, we're seeking relief because the additional cross-access area in yellow is not necessary. Next slide, please. This slide shows the access, the easement to the west in more detail. The site is owned by Bradco Supply and is used as a storage and staging area for the two industrial uses to its north and south. As you see on the screen, Bradco also owns the parcel to the north, which shares its driveway with this parcel to the west of our site. So in addition to direct frontage on New Hope Road to its immediate west, this parcel also has access to that road, and the common ownership allows for further access should this parcel develop in the future. Thus, cross-access here is not compatible or productive, as this parcel has direct connection and the ability to obtain additional access due to that mutual ownership. The lack of cross-access in both locations will not increase congestion or compromise safety, and has been designed by our professional engineers at Kimley Horn, who've confirmed the lack of conflict with approved projects in the vicinity. They'll be available to answer questions at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please. And based on this, we've meet the findings for this design alternate because the design alternate meets the intent of Article 8.3, and that a well-connected and safe street network for vehicular and pedestrian connectivity will still be maintained with the provision of Bullock Farm Road and the direct connections that both the southern and western parcels access. The proposed network is appropriate for the context and site of the site and its neighbors, and it connects Bullock Farm Road to Freedom Drive to provide additional access to the north and east. Number two, the proposed design alternate does not increase congestion or compromise safety, and that maintains that vehicular access between Freedom Drive to the west, or to the east, excuse me, and New Hope Road to the west, and that the sites relieved of cross access here still have direct existing access to both roadways. Third, it does not conflict with an approved or built roadway construction project adjacent to or in the vicinity of the site. Next slide, please. And the proposal is reasonable due to one or more of the following. Now, we meet each of these points, and these are on your screen as well as in our packet, but I'd like to focus on points B and C, because as we've shown in the presentation, compliance would not meaningfully improve connectivity where the parcels relieved of cross-access have existing adequate access to New Hope Road and to Freedom Drive. And C, compliance is not compatible with the adjacent uses because cross-access between the proposed industrial and existing manufactured home use to the south would be incompatible and was discouraged by council at the rezoning of these parcels. And second, cross-access with the existing building supply and storage yard use to the west is incompatible with the industrial employee access on our site. And for these reasons, I submit that we have, before I close our hearing, I'd like to call Mr. Travis Flewitt, a transportation engineer with Kimley Horn, who's available to answer questions and just to confirm and attest to two of the findings that we've made today.
Hopefully y'all can hear me again. Yes.
Mr. Flewitt, please state your name and address for the record.
Travis Flewitt with Kimley Horn & Associates, 421 Fayetteville Street.
Could you please summarize your education and experience for the board?
Yes, I have a master's degree in transportation engineering from the University of Texas at Austin. I'm a professional engineer in the state of North Carolina with over 16 years experience performing traffic impact analyses.
Thank you. And have you had the opportunity to review the proposed site plan for its compliance with the requirements today?
Yes, my firm prepared the plans and I have reviewed them.
In your opinion, would this request significantly increase congestion or compromise safety?
No, it will not.
In your opinion, would the request conflict with an approved or built roadway construction project adjacent to or in the vicinity of the site?
No, there are no such projects in the area.
Thank you, Mr. Flewitt. At this time, I'd like to tender Mr. Flewitt as an expert witness and make him available to the board. If there are no further questions for Mr. Flewitt, I'd submit we've submitted competent material and substantial evidence for each of the findings justifying approval, and we appreciate your vote, but are open for questions for Mr. Flewitt, for myself, for any member of the development team.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Open it up to the board. Any questions for the applicant's team? Okay. Mr. McDonald, any questions from you about anything you've heard?
No, I have no further comments at this time.
Okay, then let us move on. Is there anyone else here who wishes to speak in support of this request? Anyone else here to speak in opposition to this request? Then we'll bring it back to The applicant, anything further you wish to add for us, Ms. Schwedler?
No, sir.
And Mr. McDonald, anything else from you?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okey-doke. Board members, give you a last chance for questions.
Mr. Swink, I would just confirm, I know Keegan stated, I believe at the beginning, transportation didn't have anything to add. I just didn't know, Daniel, if after the presentation, there was anything for transportation staff to add. You might want to just triple confirm that.
Thank you very much for the reminder. Yes, sir, Mr. King or Mr. Kimbrell, anything from you about this case?
Thank you, Mr. Swink, for the opportunity. I don't have anything to add. I'll let Bradley speak to if he does or not.
This Bradley, no.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Hill, for the reminder. Okay, in that case, we'll close the evidentiary hearing, bring it to the board for deliberations or perhaps a motion. Mr. Coons?
Make a motion to approve.
Have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Miles, second. Any further discussion from the board? We'll move to a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Coates.
Approve.
Mr. Miles.
Approve.
Mr. Swink.
Approve.
Ms. Rudisill.
Approved.
Mr. Sutton.
Approved.
Thank you. The next 5.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Schwedler.
Thank you all.
Righty. So let us move along to our evidentiary hearing item 4. We have 2 cases that will be called together for the purposes of this hearing, but voted on separately. Remember, we had a withdrawn by the applicant, the variance BOA 0048-2019 was withdrawn. We're left with 721 Halifax Street and 18 Seaboard Avenue, design adjustment A1120, and design alternate A1220.
Right. And we have 5 people sign up to participate in this case. And again, when I call your name, please state your name and address for the record and confirm your consent to proceed in this remote format. Molly Stewart.
Molly Stewart, Morningstar Law Group, 421 Fayetteville Street, here in Raleigh, and I consent to participate in this virtual format.
Okay, Ms. Stewart, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, Joseph Pung.
Joseph Pung, 223 Southwest Street, Suite 1100, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27603. And I consent to participate in this digital format.
Mr. Pung, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, John Florian.
John Florian, Hoffman & Associates, 11 West Franklin Street, Raleigh, North Carolina, and I consent to this digital format.
Okay, Mr. Florian, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Rob Stewart.
Yes, this is Rob Stewart, VP of Development for Hoffman Associates, 11 West Franklin Street, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27604, and I consent to this format.
Mr. Stewart, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
And then last we have Ross Massey.
This is Ross Massey with Stewart, 223 Southwest Street, Suite 1100, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27603. I consent to participating in the remote meeting format.
Okay, Mr. Massey, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. So I will proceed with the first case, A1120. This is for relief from the following streetscape and roadway improvements for Franklin Street, a main street parallel parking street set forth in sections 845D and 852 of the Unified Development Ordinance. a 13-foot to 20-foot design adjustment to the required 73-foot right-of-way to permit a variable width right-of-way of 53 feet to 60 feet, a 1-foot design adjustment to the required 12-foot travel lane width that results in a travel lane of 11 feet, and a 2-foot design adjustment to the required 10-foot sidewalk width that results in a sidewalk of 8 feet, and relief from the following streetscape and roadway improvements for Seaboard Avenue, a Main Street parallel parking street set forth in UDO sections 845D and 852. A design adjustment to replace the required parallel parking area along the north side of the street with a curb extension for a maximum of 105 linear feet. A 2-foot design adjustment to the required 12-foot travel lane width that results in a travel lane of 10 feet. A 0.5-foot design adjustment to the required 8.5-foot parallel parking lane that results in a parallel parking lane of 8 feet. A design adjustment to permit placement of street trees within tree lawns rather than in tree grates. A 2-foot design adjustment to the required 6-foot planting area width that results in a planting area of 4 feet. A 2-foot design adjustment to the required 10-foot sidewalk width that results in a sidewalk of 8 feet. A 2.5-foot design adjustment to the required 20.5 feet, 1/2 section back of curb to back of curb that results in a back of curb to back of curb of 18 feet, and a 6.5-foot design adjustment to the required 36.5 feet, 1/2 section right-of-way width that results in a right-of-way width of 30 feet in order to construct a 449,554 square foot mixed-use building consisting of 298 dwelling units and restaurant/retail uses and integrated parking deck on a 3.62 acre property, zone DX7 UG, located at 721 Halifax Street and 18 Seaboard Avenue. Chairman Swink, at this time, would you like me to also read the request for A12-20?
Yes, please, if you go ahead and introduce that one.
Okay, thank you. So 12-20 request for a design alternate for complete relief from the site access requirements set forth in section 835A3 of the Unified Development Ordinance, which requires vehicles to enter/exit the site in a forward motion to allow vehicles to enter the loading dock on Franklin Street in a backwards motion, a 21-foot design alternate from the 32-foot maximum driveway width requirement set forth in UDO section 835C1B to permit a mixed-use/commercial 2-way driveway onto Franklin Street, width of 53 feet, and a design alternate for complete relief from the alley access requirement set forth in UDO section 835C3A, which requires any parking area to take access from an adjacent alley with a minimum right-of-way width of 24 feet, to not provide access from the parking area to Able Alley, in order to construct a 449,554 square foot mixed-use building consisting of 298 dwelling units and restaurant/retail uses and integrated parking deck on a 3.62 acre property, zone DX7 UG, located at 721 Halifax Street and Seaboard Avenue. So as you can see, this is an aerial image just showing the existing site conditions. The property is bounded by Franklin Street, Halifax Street, Seaboard Avenue, and Able Avenue as well. The entire collection of properties zoned DX7 UG. Here is the specific site plan for these first two cases. Just to provide kind of a general overview of what's being proposed. Of course, the first request for design adjustments are related to roadway and streetscape improvements, specifically for Franklin Street and Seaboard Avenue. For Franklin Street, there are adjustments to the right-of-way width, travel lane width, and sidewalk widths that will be shown there. Along Seaboard Avenue, there are adjustments sought to the parallel parking lane width, travel lane width, the extension of the curb, and the elimination of some parallel parking along Seaboard Avenue. The applicant is also seeking an adjustment to locate the street trees within tree lawns instead of tree grates. There are adjustments also sought to planting area width, sidewalk width, back of curb width, and to allow for a variable width right of way. I will note that there have been extensive discussions between the applicant and transportation staff related to this project and also the following case, which abuts it and is controlled by the same property owner along Seaboard Avenue. You'll notice once we get to that case that the requests are very similar in nature, but actually do consist of two site plans, hence the need to hear them separately. Because of these extensive discussions, I do not believe that transportation staff has any specific comment related to this, but they are, of course, available to answer any questions. Along Seaboard Avenue, what this really applies to in terms of the design adjustment request is a more or less customized streetscape that deviates from the required or the standard Main Street parallel parking street cross section. The applicants have provided some additional detail and broken out each of their requests within their application that I think may make it a little easier if you're looking for specifics onto any particular section. As it relates to the design alternate request, it's three parts. The section is to allow for vehicles to enter the loading dock on Franklin Street in a backwards motion. So Franklin Street, the driveway there is also the driveway that they are seeking allowance for to be wider than would otherwise be required by the code. It would be a 53-foot wide two-way driveway. And they're also seeking to allow vehicles, again, to enter that loading dock in a backwards motion. And then the third part of the design alternate is related to the alley shown here to the west. Essentially, the code requires that parking provide or take access from an alley if it maintains a width of 24 feet. And the applicant is seeking for relief from that standard related to parking access on the alley. That concludes my commentary. I'm happy to answer any questions, but would also defer to transportation staff on anything technical related to the transportation requests.
Okay, thank you. So just to be clear, the transportation does not have anything to offer at this time, but is available for questions?
That's my understanding, but maybe would want to confirm that with either Bradley or Daniel.
Okay.
This is Daniel. That's correct. We don't have anything to add at this time, but we are available if you have questions through the process.
Great. Okay, thanks. Okay, board, any questions for Mr. McDonald or transportation at this time? Nope. Okay, Ms. Stewart, you're up.
Thank you, Chairman Swink and members of the board. And thank you, Mr. McDonald, as well. I wanted to begin by requesting that our complete applications be admitted into the record. With our three matters today, we will have a total of 22 different requests. So I will not plan to walk through how each of those requests meets each of the design adjustment and design alternate standards, unless requested. But I did want to take a broad view to begin as far as this overall site, and we'll get to what we call Block A later, which is to the south of the block we're looking at right now. But overall, this area is a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle. It's got tight existing blocks. It's got existing streets. There are existing buildings that are affecting what you can do with the right-of-way, and there is a Duke Energy transmission easement coming through the site. So it's been tricky to fit everything in, but you'll probably be relieved to hear that the vast majority of the requests results from the need for a narrower right-of-way. And once you allocate that narrowing between all the various street elements, it results in a very large number of requests. But the request is in fact much simpler than it seems. So previously, we have been in to make some requests regarding Block A to the south. And that impacts this because many of our requests today are effectively duplicate because it pertains to Seaboard Avenue. And so you'll hear some of the same requests pertaining to both Block A to the south as well as Block B that we're considering right now. And so those will affect Seaboard Avenue in similar ways. When we came in previously with Block A, we had requested a wider driveway on Seaboard Station Drive, a narrower right-of-way on Seaboard Avenue, and you'll hear a revisit of that request today, and also some changes over on Halifax Street, which don't really affect what we're doing today. We also had a variance on Seaboard Station Drive, again, not affecting what we're doing here today. So with that big picture, I would just like to note that in general, aside from those requests that pertain to the right-of-way width, there are a few extras, and those have to do primarily with the desire to incorporate more greenery into the site by converting the tree grates into tree lawns, as well as providing for a curb bump out for some visual interest in a pedestrian and cafe space. You'll see when we get through our slides that the overall vision for this area is an extremely pedestrian-friendly, highly landscaped, high amenity streetscape area. And so it's required a little bit of tweaking to the standard requirements. So to begin with our requests, next slide, please. Great. So here we're looking at Franklin Street. And on Franklin Street, you see that our requests are numbered if you have your materials in front of you. And requests 1, 2, and 4 of our design adjustments are all width related and related to Franklin Street. Due to the existing building shown there, well, to orient you a little bit, the proposed building shown on the south side of Franklin Street is on our Block B. So that's the site that we're working with today, and Franklin Street is what we're working on. But if you go across Franklin Street and then over to the west, you see that large existing building, and you can see how that is impacting the right-of-way and where it can be. That is not part of that site is not part of anything that we're working on today. And so that building remains, and since they're kind of affecting that right-of-way, Franklin Street is going to be straightened out a bit to achieve a lesser curve than exists there today. And so between kind of trying to straighten out what's there and trying to accommodate that existing building that's not changing, we've had to narrow that right-of-way. And so in narrowing the right-of-way on Franklin Street, that reduction is requested to be allocated between the sidewalk width and the travel lane width. And so in order to minimize the overall request in any given streetscape element, it's being spread over the various elements. And so those are the requests on Franklin Street. To move on to Seaboard Avenue, next slide, please. So here's where we are greatly impacted by the Duke Energy easement. And you can see that in yellow, and it's coming down Halifax Street there on the east. And it also turns and goes down Seaboard Avenue and impacts how you can use your right-of-way in both of those locations. So here, the overall right-of-way reduction is being allocated between the travel lane and the parking lane. And those two together will impact the back of curb to back of curb standard. It's also impacting the width of the planting area and the sidewalk. So those account for nearly all of the requests here. As we talked about a little bit, there's also a request to remove approximately 4 spaces, and it's approximate because it's really, the code just calls for a certain number of linear feet. So the request is to remove approximately 4 spaces of what would be on-street parking in favor of a curb bump out. Next slide, please. There, and you can see it there, and you see it marked as less than 105 feet. So no more than 105 feet of what would be on-street parking would be taken out of that area. And that just provides some visual interest, some additional pedestrian and cafe space there, and that high amenity streetscape that we talked about. Egan, I think you're controlling the slides. Do you mind going ahead 3 more slides? Great. So just to get an idea, this is kind of really the vision of what's going on here. And so we have a little bit of difference in that sidewalk width. We can go back 2 slides, please. Okay, and here's just a visual for why we're asking for the tree lawn instead of the tree grate. Although the picture on the left is the tree lawn, and it's actually a relatively new one, very close by on Peace Street. Over time, this can provide much more greenery in the area than those tree grates can. And given our kind of tight existing jigsaw puzzle anyway, we're hoping to recapture that as green space. So those are the requests related to Seaboard Avenue on Block B. We can move then to the design alternate requests on Block B. And here we want to go ahead one slide, please. Okay, so our design alternates, so here we're back up on Franklin Street. This is the north side of the site. And the first request is for the loading dock entry using a backing motion rather than forward all the way through the site. We've seen this before in the Seaboard area, and this is just related to the fact that full forward motions are impractical on this very small downtown block. It's more of a suburban standard. So here, you can actually see in this close-up kind of where the loading would be there on the left side. Also, we're looking to exceed the maximum driveway width, and the reason for that is so that we're able to combine the driveway and the loading dock in one single curb cut on what we think will be the least interference that we can provide, and that's up here on Franklin Street. Halifax Street faces Peace College. We've got Seaboard Avenue with more traffic, and then as far as Able Alley is a little bit different. If you're familiar with the Dutch Wooners concept or not, it is designed to be more of a pedestrian-focused space, although a car will be able to travel through it. Keegan, do you mind going back to, say, oh no, I'm sorry, it was in your slides. Never mind, Keegan had shown a version where it showed how Able Alley actually sort of is expected to wander a little bit and not be a straight line through that area. I'm not sure where we are. Thank you. There you go. So you can see that it's got its twists and turns. It's got shop fronts on it. So that is also, like the rendering I showed you, designed to be a very pedestrian-friendly space and not amenable to loading dock or all the traffic that would come and go from a parking facility in this area. So the request is to concentrate all that up on Franklin Street together in one curb cut, and that exceeds the driveway width. Keegan also mentioned that Able Alley, in general, there is a requirement that if you have an alley frontage, you're required to take your vehicular access from that alley. And as I talked about, this is not intended to be a typical alley, which is really used for service purposes and for access purposes. This is more of a pedestrian space. But also, it is true that there is a grade on this site that would make it difficult or impossible to achieve access from that site as well, or from that side of the property. So that is my overview of all of our requests on Block B, many of which you'll hear again related to Block A, as I mentioned. And not only am I available for questions, but I think you've heard that we have our engineering team from Stewart, Ross Massey, and Joe Pung here with us today, as well as from Hoffman, who'll be developing the site. We have Rob Stewart, the Vice President of Development, and John Florian, the Executive Vice President, available for questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Stewart. Board members, any questions? Okay, not hearing anything. Mr. McDonald, do you have anything based on what you just heard?
Not at this time.
About the transportation team, Mr. Kimbrell, anything again at this point from what you heard?
All right, can you hear me okay now?
You're breaking up.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, now.
Sorry, I've done some muting issues. The main thing I would offer is echo the applicant's comments of extensive work with the city's group. There's been numerous discussions over the last few months, so we feel good at where we are with the streetscape around Block A and for B, that matter. The only comment that I would extend for board is related to Franklin realignment. So today's Franklin Street has a dip right there where the alley ties in, adjacent to that existing building. The proposed alignment is an improvement in many ways. It addresses a horizontal curvature. One thing I would point out, it does move the right-of-way close to the existing building on the north side. And the challenge with that would be is upon redevelopment of that lot, it could potentially create a challenge for putting in the required streetscape. Something to consider if the applicant would be willing to throw out a condition about providing an ultimate streetscape upon a submittal on that other property line. But as it relates to Block B itself, staff has no concern.
Okay, thank you. Let me clarify regarding offering a condition. The condition could only apply to this applicant, not to the other property owner. So this would be the response. So what you're suggesting is this applicant would take the responsibility for the streetscape in that section. Is that?
No, you're correct. I apologize. Earlier in the presentation, it was mentioned that the property owner, this applicant is also the property owner to the north of Franklin Street as well. And they mentioned not having a plan at this time, but ultimately looking to do a development of that side.
Okay.
The only thing is I'm not sure whether that property is a part of this design adjustment or alternate request. The only thing I would just note is that your standard is you can impose conditions that make the request more consistent with the standard. If it's a different property, I'm not sure that that would be a request you could do with this project, but I don't know. I know there's an upcoming, Bradley, is that case not in at all right now? Is this something in for redevelopment for that property?
This time we do not have a bill for that.
Okay.
I just wanted to point it out because the current alignment provides a streetscape on the north side of Franklin that's technically better than what this current realignment provides in the interim condition.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Anything else?
Nope. On that, staff does not oppose anything else.
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
I'm sorry. So beyond that, staff does not oppose any of the requests.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Okay, so let us say, is anyone else here to speak in support of this request? Anyone else here to speak in opposition to this request? So, Stuart, anything further for you at this time?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit. One more time.
Ms. Stewart, is there anything else from you at this time?
No, thank you.
Okay, how about from staff? Is McDonald or transportation, anything from you guys?
No.
Okay, board members, any questions? Okay, we'll close the hearing and move to the board deliberations. I had some initial concerns about the reduction of the sidewalk width and the planting width, but having seen the detail, and Ms. Stewart, I thank you for the level of presentation that made it clear. I'm much more comfortable with what you're proposing. So I'm okay with what I'm hearing. Does anyone have any concerns or anyone wish to offer a motion?
This is Donald. I would go ahead and make a motion to approve.
And there, I will remind the board, there's two pending requests, A11 and A12, so specify which one.
All right.
Okay. I think we're dealing with the first one, so it'd be A11.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder. Thank you, Mr. Meyer. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second to approve A11.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on design adjustments A11? We'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Puccini?
I can remember to unmute myself. I have to assume that was Mr. Coons who seconded, correct? Mr. Coons, did you second it?
I did.
Thank you. All right then. Roll call. Mr. Mile.
I vote to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Coons.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Swink.
Approve.
Thank you, Ms. Rudisill.
Approve.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton.
Approve.
Thank you.
Okay,
That is
great. Now
fine.
let's go to design alternate A12-20. And entertain a motion.
This Mr. Mile, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve A12.
Thank you. We need a second.
Second to approve A12.
Okay, Mr. Coons, correct?
Correct.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? We'll do a roll call vote.
Thank you. Mr. Mile.
Vote to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Coons.
Approve.
Mr. Swink.
Approve.
Ms. Rudisill.
Approve.
Mr. Sutton.
Approve.
Thank you. That makes 5.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's move on to hearing number 5. This is 8 West P Street, 605 Halifax Street, and 5 Seaboard Avenue. This is design adjustments A-13-19.
Okay, and we have the same 5 participants signed up from the last meeting, but pursuant to this new state law, we need to, for the record, go through this exercise again for this evidentiary hearing. So we'll go through quickly. Again, when I call your name, please again state your name and address and confirm your consent to this remote proceeding for the record. Molly Stewart.
Molly Stewart, Morningstar Law Group, 421 Fayetteville Street, Raleigh, and I consent to participate in the virtual meeting.
Okay, Ms. Stewart, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, Joseph Pung.
Joseph Pung, 223 Southwest Street, Suite 1100, Raleigh, North Carolina. And I consent to participate in the digital format.
And Mr. Pung, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
John Florian.
John Florian, Hoffman Associates, 11 West Franklin Street, Raleigh, North Carolina, and I consent to the digital format.
Mr. Florian, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Rob Stewart.
Rob Stewart, Hoffman Associates, 11 West Franklin Street, Raleigh, North Carolina, and I consent to this digital format.
Mr. Stewart, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thanks.
Ross Massey.
Ross Massey with Stewart, 223 Southwest Street, Raleigh, North Carolina. And I consent to participating in the virtual meeting format.
Mr. Massey, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide in this evidentiary hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you. So this is request for relief from the following streetscape improvements for Seaboard Station Drive, a main street, parallel parking street, set forth in sections 845D and 852 of the Unified Development Ordinance, a design adjustment to permit placement of street trees within tree lawns rather than in tree grates, and relief from the following streetscape and roadway improvements for Seaboard Avenue, a main street parallel parking street set forth in UDO section 845D and 852, a 2-foot design adjustment to the required 12-foot travel lane width that results in a travel lane of 10 feet, a 0.5-foot design adjustment to the required 8.5-foot parallel parking lane that results in a parallel parking lane of 8 feet, a design adjustment to permit placement of street trees within tree lawns rather than in tree grates, a 2-foot design adjustment to the required 6-foot planting area width that results in a planting area of 4 feet, a 2-foot design adjustment to the required 10-foot sidewalk width that results in a sidewalk of 8 feet, a 2.5-foot design adjustment to the required 20.5-foot 1/2 section back of curb to back of curb that results in a back of curb to back of curb of 18 feet, and a 6.5 feet to 15.5 feet design adjustment to the required 36.5 1/2 section right-of-way width that results in a variable width right-of-way of 21 feet to 30 feet in order to construct a 217,181 square foot mixed-use building consisting of 75 dwelling units, 149 hotel units, and restaurant and retail uses on a 0.96 acre property, zone DX7UG, located at 8 West P Street, 605 Halifax Street, and 5 Seaboard Avenue. So as you can see, this is the 3 parcels to the south of Block B. This is bordered by Seaboard Avenue, also Seaboard Station Drive to the west, also West P Street, and the street to the east. The requests here are design adjustments, again, related to streetscape elements. There is one request along Seaboard Station Drive to permit trees to be placed in tree lawns rather than in tree grates. The requests related to Seaboard Avenue are nearly identical to those for Block B and the portion of the streetscape to the north. The one exception is that for this particular street, the applicant at this time is not seeking relief to provide a curb extension and eliminate parallel parking along this half of the roadway. However, other than that, the requests are mirrored for this part of Seaboard Avenue. Again, this in conjunction with Block B underwent extensive review by transportation staff, and there have been numerous discussions to arrive at this juncture. I do not have any further comments at this time, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And if not, I will pass it off to the applicant.
Okay, thank you very much. Regarding transportation, any comments from transportation at this point that we should hear, or will you just be open to questions?
Thank you, Mr. Swank. We'll just be open to questions if you have them, but we don't have anything additional to add at this time.
Great. All right. Thanks so much. Then let us move along. Oh, I'm sorry. Any board member questions? Jumping ahead of myself here. Nope. Okay, Ms. Stewart, it's all yours.
Thank you. Third slide, please, showing Seaboard Avenue. That's the one. One back. That's the one. Okay, great. So this will all sound familiar to you. Most of the requests, again, relate to the need to reduce that right-of-way due to the Duke Energy easement. And so of the numbered requests, items 2, 3, and 5 through 8 are all related to the width request. And that overall right-of-way width reduction in this case will be allocated between the travel lane and the parallel parking lane. And again, together, those two things impact the back of curb standard, also the planting area and the sidewalk. So those are all of the width requests here. And you can see the difference between the UDO standard there in sort of teal, and then our proposal in red in the exhibit. Aside from that, the only other request is to provide the trees and tree lawns rather than tree grates. And that request applies to both Seaboard Avenue as well as Seaboard Station Drive, which is on the west side of the block. And you've seen the picture of that before, so I won't revisit that. And those are all of the requests that pertain to Block A. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have any questions for the applicant? Okay, staff, anything you want to ask of the applicant?
Not at this time.
Is that true for transportation as well?
Yeah, this is Daniel. Not at this time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, let us move on. Anyone else here wishing to speak in support of this request? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this request? Okay, Ms. Stewart, again, give you one more opportunity. Anything you wish to add?
No, thank you.
Okay, Mr. McDonald?
No, thank you.
Mr. King, anything from you? Daniel King, anything from you?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. The board, any questions? Okay, moving right along then. We'll close the evidentiary hearing, move to board deliberations. Any comments, thoughts, or a motion if anyone has one?
I think it's pretty clean. Motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Koontz. We have a motion to approve design adjustment A1319. Is there a second?
A second.
Second that motion.
Ms. Rudisil, thank you for your second. Any further discussion? We'll move to a roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Koontz.
Approve.
Ms. Rudisil? Ms. Rudisil, you there?
Approved.
Thank you. Mr. Swink?
Approve.
Mr. Miles?
Approve.
Mr. Sutton?
Approved.
Thank you. That makes 5.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Stewart.
Thank you.
Let us move along now. Approval of the minutes for the June 8th, 2020 meeting. Those were mailed out to you. Hope you had a chance to look at them. Any additions or corrections to the June 8th meeting minutes? If not, may I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the June 8th minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Miles. Is there a second? I'll second. Any further discussion? A roll call vote again, Mr. Puccini?
That's fine. Mr. Miles?
Approve.
Mr. Swink?
Approve.
Mr. Koontz? Mr. Koontz, you're muted.
I think you're muted.
I am not muted anymore. I approve.
Ms. Rudisil?
Approved.
And Mr. Sutton?
Approved.
That makes 5.
Thank you very much. Ms. Hill, what you got for us?
Thank you. I do have an update today. I'm not sure if you guys followed at council their last meeting on July 7th, that they approved a text amendment. It's been pending for a while. It's TC 1719. It's a design alternate text amendment. It became effective 5 days after adoption, which is today. What that text amendment did was, I think you guys probably know, there's been this kind of like a ping pong with the design adjustments, design alternates, trying to get some objective standards for staff to apply while creating a quasi-judicial process. That involves all the transportation related matters that you have become familiar with. This text amendment was kind of the end goal, to have it all in one approval process. Now it's now called a design alternate. There will be no more design adjustments. It's just now design alternate. One change for you guys is that the text amendment sends these to either the Planning Commission or Appearance Commission to sit quasi-judicial at the discretion of council to choose which one. Council chose to send these to Appearance Commission. I think that the idea is that the Appearance Commission also hears administrative alternates, and so they're kind of all in the same realm. So the design adjustments, design alternates, those will start to be heard by Appearance Commission and will be phased out of BOA. So you'll go back to hearing what you heard before all this started, which is variances, special use permits, and appeals of administrative decisions. So a couple things, though, is that you're going to continue to hear some design adjustments or alternates for the next couple months, I anticipate. The reason why is because under the North Carolina Permit Choice Act, anybody who's already in the queue with an application, be it a BOA application or a site plan submittal, subdivision submittal, they have as long as their application is still alive and they haven't abandoned the application, they have the choice to pick the version of the ordinance that was in place at the time they applied, or the new ordinance if it changes before a decision is made on their application. So long story short, you will still hear some of these. Know that those are going to be cases that were already in the queue before this change happened. So, but they will slowly start to be faded out, and eventually all design alternates will be heard at the Appearance Commission. So happy to answer any questions. I know you guys have had a heavy caseload with all these alternates and adjustments, and really helpful in getting this process smoothed over. So, and some of you have been on the board and probably have always heard design adjustments or alternates. So, and again, happy to answer any questions. If you want to take a look, the text amendment, it's in board docs for City Council from July 7th. And that's what I've got for you today.
Okay, well, that's great. Interesting. We'll see where that takes us for the next few months. Anything else anyone wish to bring to the group today? Again, a good meeting. Thanks for your patience as we work through this process. I think we'll be meeting this way for a while, it seems. So unless there's, yes, ma'am.
Actually, I did one more thing. If you guys can think back to March, feels like a lifetime ago, but we were talking about a retreat and we put that on hold until we can meet in person. You'll see some changes that we've already started to implement that I wanted to discuss with you at your retreat. The way your minutes look, the findings of fact and conclusions of law attached, those decisions. And there's some other things that I would like to discuss with you at your retreat. We haven't discussed internally yet whether we will do a remote retreat. I think we were waiting to see what would happen. So I would still like to do that soon. And I would, I guess maybe we can start having some discussions, or you guys can start thinking about whether we would want to do it remotely if we're going to be meeting in this format. I will say with the Parents Commission, we're going to but most likely do a quasi-judicial training that you guys could all watch that as well as a refresher. But I would like to do a training with you guys about what the kind of requests you hear specifically, variances and special use permits and all of that. So just start thinking about whether, and maybe let me know or let staff know if you would like to do a training remotely in the next month or two.
Great. Okay, thanks. I don't anticipate this, but just to clarify, because I know the Planning Commission and with City Council, there was usually a brief summer break, so the break-in meetings. Since we only meet once a month, I assume we'll still meet in August. Is that correct?
You know, I would ask Eric or Keegan, what does the BOA typically do in the summer? I'm not really sure. Okay, or Ralph. Ralph's saying yes.
They've never had a summer break since I've been working with the board the last 6 years. Most other boards tend to meet twice a month already. This board meets once a month, so we've never suspended any meetings for the summer.
And that is, Eric is correct. The board never has taken a summer break. They've always managed to meet each month.
Yeah, I suspected as much. That makes sense. But I had to ask. Always that possibility. Okay. Anything else, anyone?
You had a break in April, so you took it early.
Okay, thanks for that. Good to have your history of the organization to draw upon. Okay, well, this is again a good meeting. Thank you all, and we will talk again in a month. And thank you for staff for all you do for us. And we'll be talking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Good evening. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.